There's a reason that every time one of these professors or TAs, whether it's Lindsay Shepherd in Canada or Brett Weinstein in Washington, why are they all lefties who then say one thing that upsets the left and then they're purged? It will happen. It will come for you. I mean, if there's someone that's watching this right now that is a hardcore progressive that's going, man, I hate Prager and Rubin and this is all nonsense. Guess what? If you have any spark of individualism in you, if you have anything about you that's interesting or different, they will come to destroy that too. So you can't just sit there and wait. You cannot. This is the great fight of our generation.
Okay, I've been trying to get this interview off the ground for about a year, and for whatever reason, we just could never get on the same page. But joining me now is horror and science fiction author, as well as rugged outdoorsman Michael Hodges of Severed Press. Mike, thanks for joining, and I'm glad we could finally get this going. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
And you just got back yesterday from an impromptu camping trip, as you're prone to do this time of year, right?
Yeah, I was just up in Glacier National Park filming some bears and waterfalls. It was a pretty good time.
Did you say filming some bears?
Yeah, yeah. I encountered a black bear mom, a huge sow, and a couple cubs, and took some pictures of it. It's on my Facebook. They were kind of blocking me on the trail, so I had to go around them.
Now, are black bears the ones that you should play dead for if encountered, or run like hell?
That's a really good question. The theory is, or the advice given is usually that if a black bear is chasing you or following you, it's just hungry and it's going to eat you. So you got to fight it. Whereas grizzly bears are more territorial, and usually if a grizzly bear comes after you, it's just protecting its space, and so that's the one you play dead for.
Now, it didn't do Timothy Treadwell any good, though, did it?
No, that whole, oh my God, that movie was so heartbreaking. It was so good, though, but so heartbreaking. No, you just can't camp in, I've seen, I think that he camped in, next to a salmon river on a bad bear year, in a bad salmon year, too late in the season when the bears are going through hyperphagia. And it's just bad news.
Now, what is hyperphagia? Is that something to do with starvation or pre-hibernation or what?
Yeah, pre-hibernation, exactly. It's kind of like, going to just getting as much food as you can before you hibernate.
Wow. So,
fattening up, yeah.
I wonder, though, it seemed like it was a strange bear that had wandered into the territory because of the late changing of the season, and that it wasn't one that he had frequently interacted with that ended up getting him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and it was a really old bear, too, so it's like the most dangerous bears typically are a mom with cubs for defensive purposes, and then, the younger males that are just striking out on their own that don't know any better, and then the old bears that they're missing teeth and their teeth hurt and they want easy food.
Mm-hmm. And the scene where you can watch them listening to the footage, the director and his on again off again girlfriend, they don't let you hear the audio of him getting mauled to death, him and his girlfriend, but just the looks on their faces tells the story that this is like an all-encompassing just violence that is taking place in their ears, and it's probably a good thing that they didn't let us hear that.
I would agree. I think that just seeing the reaction, it was such good filmmaking to leave the audio out and to just show the reactions, and it's just a brilliant film.
Yeah, and it says something, despite his some occasional naivety with what he felt he was doing.
Right.
It does say something that he was able to survive that many summers in their territory without any incidents like this.
That's hilarious, because that's exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly what I've always thought about it. Yes, he did have some of that, and you could be like, well, some of what he did was dumb too. However, there was something to it because he survived as long as he did.
And I also think that I got the impression that his female friend wasn't exactly thrilled about being there either that late in the season or at all. She was just kind of there to support him,
Yeah.
Which is also
it's
sad.
Unfortunate, and that's really the most unfortunate thing. It's like, if you want to make bad decisions by yourself and you face the consequences, but if you drag someone else into your bad decisions, it's just really unfortunate.
Have you been an outdoorsman your whole life? Scouring the woods, fishing, hunting, and all this.
Yeah, I was lucky. I was lucky to have family that had like a couple small cabins up north. I was raised in Chicago, which is basically just, if you've ever been there, it's basically 10 million people crammed into parking lots for as far as you can see. And then beyond the parking lots, you have industrial agriculture for as far as you can see. So the nearest national forest literally is 5.5 hours, 6 hours in any direction from Chicago. And that's public land, and that's space, and that's wilderness, and that's room to roam. And so I was lucky enough to have family members growing up that would pluck me from the concrete sprawl and show me that there was more to life. Like my dad, my father Bruce, my uncle Tony, my grandfather, all took me up north to the national forest and to the state forest to fish and explore.
And so, would you call yourself a survivalist at this point? If you had your own reality show, and I know that's a poor comparison, but like one of these man versus nature type things, where you were to survive alone in the wilderness for X amount of days, you could probably do it with little effort, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be taxing on me, no question about it. But I would have some skills to be able to cope with that in a decent way, just from all my experience in the woods.
Yeah, and that's a lot about that's a lot of what The Puller, your debut novel, was about this guy. And I mean, obviously it's biographical in some areas, through the lens of fiction, where this guy, was his name Matt?
Matt.
He returns to this to this cabin in the wake of a series of losses that he basically comes off like a living country song. His girlfriend died, his dad died, and his dog died. And I mean, it's just how many punches can one man take in such a brief amount of time.
If a dirt road and a pickup truck there, that would be a modern country song.
Yeah. So he goes out to this cabin, and we occasionally, if I remember correctly, we occasionally are treated to flashbacks of his time with these people individuals he lost.
Yeah.
And there's also an interesting monologue at the beginning, which is a transcript of a talk radio show, where this guy calls in with one of these coast-to-coast type anecdotal, accounts of was it an ox or a moose that was pulled up into a tree by something? It was a moose. And the host tries to debunk him right away by saying, oh, it's obviously a cougar, but cougars can't lift something 2 or 3 times their weight in a moose, right? Especially up into a tree.
They're powerful, but not that powerful.
Yeah. And so you have the talk show. I was playing skeptic, and this guy is just pouring this hysteria out on to his radio show, and it sets a nice mood for what we're in store for as we watch Matt come up against this force of nature during his stay in the cabin. And it reminded me, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but there's this retired police officer, a detective named David Paulides. Now he has made an entire series of books based around true life disappearances around national parks with this same kind of flavor to them. Where they were. Have you heard of this?
No, I have not.
That's surprising because that same tone of an animal being pulled up to a great height by something that was many times larger than it, and it doesn't make any sense. And there are all these telltale signs that something mysterious and unexplainable happened. Well, that is basically David Paulides' entire cottage industry, and he covers real life cases, and they're all set.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they're all set in and around national parks. All these mysterious disappearances that are hard to debunk, and that the forest rangers and park officials just kind of throw up their hands and they try to hush up anyone who tries to talk about it too hard. And that's kind of what I was reminded of reading that opening with the talk show host and the frantic caller with this book.
Oh, cool.
I'm surprised you haven't heard of this guy.
I'll have to check that out. Definitely Google that when we're done with this. That's kind of like what the vibe I was going for. It's like a mysterious, what could do this
Mm-hmm.
And kind of thing. I think it's fun.
I'm sure you've heard some lore in your many, times in the outdoors. You've probably gathered up some lore, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
What would you say is the creepiest, most unsettling, piece of esoterica that you've come across in your time?
For me personally, there's a thing in the North Woods called the Banshee, and it supposedly steals children's souls who are camped out. And it's got red eyes, and it's about the size of a coyote. It doesn't look like a coyote. It just kind of is just eyes and like a shadowy figure, and it's attracted to campfires. And so if kids are out camping in the North Woods of the UP or Minnesota or Wisconsin or Montana or northern Washington or Idaho, which I still consider the North Woods really, but it creeps up on them and then just takes these children's souls, and then these children are just vacant. And that to me is creepy as hell. I wouldn't want that to happen.
Well, the North Woods, you're talking about
thing out there lurking. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you're talking about the North Woods, and I'm sure it's particularly cold out there at night, and you're talking about it being attracted to campfires. Well, that's kind of a catch-22 then, if it was real, right? I mean,
yeah.
You either light a campfire and get eaten by the Banshee, or you, freeze to death, but the Banshee doesn't get you. I mean, that's an interesting catch-22 there. So, I mean, do you put any faith at all in that legend, though?
No. It's like, to me, the woods are mystical, and they can be spooky, and there's things out there that definitely can cause you trouble, but I think that the drive to these places is more dangerous than these places.
Interesting.
And, like, the danger is having a deer go through your windshield and decapitating you. Like, that could actually happen.
Wow.
And so the Banshee, as scary as it is and as spooky as it is, and you can sit by a campfire and there could be things out there you hear and you're not knowing, but the odds are that the drive home is what's going to get you, not anything in the trees.
Huh. So, with the puller, were you just kind of you were utilizing, I'm sure, everything that you had learned in all your time outdoors growing up? They say you put everything you've ever known into your first novel.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing. It's a cliche, right? Write what you know, and so I'm just starting out. This is my first novel, and it's like you get a little bit of an imposter syndrome. It's like, why am I doing this? Why do I have an ego to write this 100,000-page novel about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and this creature? And so you just write what you know, and you just get on with it. And so I put everything I knew into that book. Flora, fauna, character, everything I could throw at it, I threw at it.
The flora is particularly interesting because a lot of the things that you name off in just these descriptive prosaic passages, like alder and choke cherry, and I think birch. It's just a very nice canvas that you're painting on.
Thanks.
I don't even know what choke cherry is.
Yeah, it's just a little tree.
That's it.
But it's an interesting dilemma, you know, because the polar in a lot of ways is a throwback to like early Stephen King and to Cormac McCarthy, and even to going back to Lovecraft a little bit, to some of the description in the Shoggoth at the Mountains of Madness, where he just goes on these long passages of describing the intricate carvings of the alien species, which I thought were fascinating. But I mean, people's attention spans are changing as we progress here, and you know, our phones are making us have shorter attention spans. So some people really like that, really detailed stuff, and you know, 100 pages of backstory to really get a feeling and set it up. And some people just want like the speed now. So it's always an interesting balance to try and set between the two. And it's the polar was kind of like my tribute a little bit to that, to some of that older work, at least the beginning of the polar. And if you notice in the invasive, it's a little bit
right away
faster.
Yeah, it's just immediately they're dropped into this just ridiculously aggressive scenario with these invading forces. It almost jolted me a little bit too fast in the invasive, but with the polar, as he's spending his first night in the cabin upon his little retreat from the outside world, he encounters this little voice that is not just his internal monologuing, but it seems to be its own distinctive voice advising him, and that's when he begins encountering this invisible force that is pulling him back as he tries to escape. And I believe that at one point he's knocked out and wakes up beside a dead bear. And he had
a sleeping bear.
Sleeping. See, because I thought that the invisible creature had actually got a hold of the bear and, choked the life out of it or something. That's what I seem to...
The bears seem to be smart enough to avoid it, for the most part. Mm-hmm. Bears are smarter than moose.
So
they can smell, because the bear has such a good sense of smell that it seems to steer clear mostly of the polar.
Right. What's interesting, and I can't give it away because it would rob any readers who haven't checked into this book yet, but the last line of the book really put a nice capper on the themes that you were developing with Matt. I feel like he did get some sort of personal catharsis out of that trip and that battle with this invisible force of nature. But that last line, which I won't give away, really puts it in perspective, what that little voice is that's been guiding him in this battle,
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I wrote that last line, and it felt good to write it, and I thought it had meaning, so it's good to get that kind of feedback. Nice.
Yeah, and then from there we move on to The Invasive was your second one, right?
Yes.
And I liked it for its own reasons, whereas The Puller was more about the flora, in its descriptions. The Invasive has about 3 or 4 invasive species. I don't remember if they land via spaceship or dimensional portal or what, but it's implied that they are otherworldly. However they got there, I don't remember. But you've got the radar, the sonar walruses. They're like walruses or something, right? They're basically they're frequency seals, and
the human body can be stunned or incapacitated by certain frequencies at certain intensities, and so these frequency seals can basically, they really don't have many teeth. They have like sandpaper mouths, so they stun their prey and just slowly eat them alive. So you really don't want to get caught by a frequency seal. They kind of suck.
There also, aren't there some sort of giant insect that's a part of the squadron or whatever?
Yeah, there's a I think there's a what they call the flyers, which hunt by sound only. And then what happens is like, let's say you're a survivalist and you're trying to hammer in your windows and you know that these creatures are coming, right?
They can replicate the sound of the hammering.
Yeah, like if you're just let's just say you're trapped in the invasion like Bishop is in the book, and you're trying to hammer up your windows so these creatures can't get in. Well, the flyer can hear that hammer from a couple miles away, and it will come at you and get you, and then right before it gets you, it'll mimic what it heard, and so it'll be dive bombing you, and you'll be hearing this playback out of its voice of you hammering, like half hour ago. So it's really twisted, creepy hunting birds.
There's another species that's with this group of invaders, though, right?
Yeah, there's several species. I focused on just a few primary species, but in reality, what it is it's an entire ecosystem invasion. So not only do you have we're always treated to, like most movies and most books, just have the super predator. So the super predator is the dominant species. It's the aliens and the flying saucers, right? Mm-hmm. Or it's the hunters in the movie Predator, right? We always get the apex predator in books and films. So I wanted to have I actually consulted with some scientists on this. I wanted to have a more realistic invasion. And what the research indicated was that the dominant species wouldn't send themselves to the planets. They wouldn't waste their time and their treasure to do so. They would send out thousands of clone ships that would embed on planets, and once the climate was suitable for those clone ships to operate, these clone ships would replicate the dominant species' home planet flora and fauna. So, So not only do you have super predators in the invasive, eating people, but you've got the super predators from the alien planet eating little marsupial-like creatures from the alien planet. It's just an entire ecosystem invasion.
Mm-hmm. And
so there's a lot of science in it.
That would displace a lot of the Earth ecosystem, because even the weakest of the alien food chain would probably be stronger than the strongest of the Earth food chain, I'm guessing, right?
Well, it all depends. In the invasive, the grizzly bear kind of kicks some ass.
I forgot about that.
It takes place in Montana, so you're getting a clashing of the native ecosystem on Earth in Montana with this entire ecosystem trying to establish itself in Montana. So there's actually some pretty good battles between the quote-unquote good animals and the bad ones.
Two of my favorite characters who come along later in the book, one being Colbrick. He's a hunter who right? Yeah. If I recall right?
Yeah.
And
he's a survivalist, he's no nonsense,
He's this grizzled old man, or at least middle-aged, and he kind of pulls the main character and his girlfriend out of the fray quite a bit in the beginning, before showing some of his own vulnerabilities later on. Didn't he have a daughter who died or something?
Yeah, he had. That goes unexplained. I have actually the invasive prequel coming out in a couple days that I'm doing myself. It's a shorter version of what happened before Bishop's story, but in some of Colbrick is explained a little bit. He pops in for a couple minutes, but yeah, he had a daughter who died and a son who died and a father who died. So he's had some issues. He's had a tough go of it, but he's a strong character and he knows what he's doing. So
that we have another rugged outdoorsman character who has a trinity of losses.
Yeah. Yep. Such is life, man.
Yeah. And but the other character that I really came to admire was the little dog Buddy. He's basically, was he a Basset Hound or a Jack Russell Terrier or what?
Yeah, I don't want to say what breed the dog is, just because people always are like, you too, I love you too, and I just don't want to put the version of the dog that I think it is in their heads. So yeah, it's you too, and everyone loves them. I get a lot of emails and stuff, and people always comment about you too.
The only thing that I had, well, I'm sorry, I just want to get this in there. The only issue I had with the character is, don't they call him Buddy at one point though?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, the only issue I had...
Or something like that.
Do what?
I think they refer to him as Pooch at one point, or maybe they refer to Kubrick as Buddy. I don't know. I got to go back and read it, man. It's been a little while.
The only issue I had that I thought was a little bit implausible, but it was a very minor gripe, is that when he was barking and they were in the cave trying to hide, they were like in the heart of enemy territory where these things were amassed. And he barked, and they told him to be quiet, and he obeyed. And I feel like, knowing animals as well as I do, at least disobedient ones, they don't calm down right away like that, you know? But that's a very minor gripe in what was otherwise a very well-told story. And I'm glad that you're going to explore that universe a little bit more. What did you pick up from writing that book compared to The Puller?
For me personally, it's just that's my most popular book. It's sold quite a bit. It's been Tantor Audio picked it up, and Charles Constant narrated it. And Charles Constant did Mark Cuban's How to Win at the Sport of Business, and that book is for sale at Barnes and Noble. It's been at Target, and so it's been really interesting to see that as my bestseller. And it's like the audiobook, they just did a great job on it too. And I think what I learned from it was I put a lot of time into that book, honestly. And I put a lot of time into it with my agent, Laura, who was extremely helpful with that book. And I don't think it would have been as successful as it was without that time. So basically it's just a thriller. It's a fast-paced thriller. It's got some good science in it. And I think at that point, I just learned to maybe just be a little bit faster with what I was trying to say in a novel.
Like I said, I felt like Invasive may have been a little bit too fast to kick in, but
it's different from The Polar. The first 10 pages are significantly different from The Polar.
Right. I still feel that The Puller is your best work, but you say Invasive is your best-selling, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even close.
Wow.
And in terms of the subsidiary rights, too, and what's going on with the audiobook, Invasive is the most popular book, which to me, I get, and it's just funny. It's just, I personally feel The Polar is my best novel. And I think that maybe every author feels like their first novel, their debut is their baby, or whatever. Mm. So there's like kind of that emotional attachment to it. So maybe I'm not really objectively analyzing it, but I would agree with you. I think it is too.
Well, there are also authors who, are ashamed of the first thing they ever wrote, if they didn't know what they were doing, or...
See, yeah, you know what? But here's the thing. There's some rawness in The Polar, and I think that rawness also translates into organic and eagerness and sincerity. Mm-hmm. And I think that and I wrote that book 100% for myself. And I think when you start getting into writing books to impress your writing peers and your writing critique groups, I think everyone that's doing that's in that 10-writer group, they're all starting to write the same shit. Because it's like a hive mind, And so even though there's a little bit of rawness and stuff in a debut novel, it has that sincerity, and it has that, like, a little bit of magic to it. And I think you can overlook some of the rawness if that's there. I think it is there if you're doing it right.
Well, another thing with these 10-writer groups that you mentioned is that a lot of times they're only talking about each other's books, hoping that you'll reciprocate by reading and reviewing theirs. And I know that from experience when I infiltrated a community myself, looking for a place to belong as an aspiring writer, before putting that on hold indefinitely. I know that a lot of it is just ambition, that is misdirected and ultimately self-serving. There are so many amazing books out there, and I'm always reading 50 at once. And to only read in your little niche group, based on...
Right.
Yeah, it's so depriving.
Yeah.
So, after The Invasive, Now, The Invasive has not been picked up for film rights the way The Puller has it?
The Invasive is actually out at two pretty big places right now. We had a couple call-ins on it, so that's to be determined still, which is always a coin flip.
Mm.
You know, so yeah, it's actually under consideration right now from two pretty well-known places, and that's all I can really say about it.
Well, what can you say about the Puller being optioned for film? I know that any number of things can put a project in development hell, and of course there are budgetary reasons, there are production reasons, there are any number of things that can go wrong. But what do you know at this point, other than it was optioned?
Well, it was in development hell, and we actually just switched producers, which is really interesting. I rewrote the initial screenplay to be more in line with the spirit. I mean, the initial screenplay is fantastic piece of work, but it was missing some of the spirit of the book that I felt it needed it. So I rewrote much of the script. And we have actually a new producer. He's coming up here in a couple weeks. So
very good.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about it, and it's really I don't really want it to be done. The movie to be done in a bad way. Like it should be done the way the book is, or it just shouldn't be done.
Well, you don't want $100 million budgeted movie for such a downplayed, underspoken, novel. Basically, it should be fairly, isolated. Mm-hmm. There shouldn't be a bunch of revelers, teenage partiers or whatever, out on the lake in this movie. If it's ever to be a movie, it should be fairly restrained in as far as location, I guess. So
yeah, it's got to be a very desolate, but alive, because the woods are teeming with life. Location.
Mm-hmm. Now, after The Invasive, you wrote Black Friday.
Yes.
Which was interesting, but I did feel it was a little bit of a departure. As far as I could tell, you were more confident in it, but I did feel at times that it was removed from your usual outdoor setting that you excel at, and maybe that's what threw me off about it. But basically,
I did it on purpose. Actually, I needed to challenge myself a little bit.
Mm-hmm. You don't seem to me like a mall.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you don't seem to me like a mall goer anyway, though. I mean, right?
No, not. I mean, I grew up in malls because I'm from Chicago suburbs, and that's where Black Friday takes place. And I felt like, okay, well, I just did the Puller and the Invasive, and both of those took place in remote areas of the woods, and so it's time to broaden your horizons a little bit, challenge yourself, get out of your comfort zone a little bit, and write that novel. And I feel like everyone that I talk to, it's The Invasive is my most popular novel, but I get the best feedback from Black Friday. I think a lot of people relate to it because they grew up in malls, and there's a lot of dying. It's like the whole dying mall thing. There's like dead malls everywhere in the suburbs and in the cities. It's just these concrete tombs, man, and there's a creepy thing to it. And I really just kind of wanted to do something a little bit different, and that reflected a little bit on the greed of modern society, and kind of just mock the holiday itself, the Black Friday holiday.
Mm-hmm. There's a reoccurring theme present in Black Friday that I don't know how much I should say without giving away a central conceit from the Puller, but there is a reoccurring spirit that makes its presence known within the mall, guiding these characters, particularly the female lead, and it stems from that same place that the little voice helping Matt in the Puller comes from, as far as I can tell. it almost seems like you're sort of world building there. This whole universal reality that you can use later as a sandbox.
Yeah, I do that, and it's kind of like this sub-level spiritual realm. And in Black Friday, what was going on with that mall and what happened with the isolation of that mall created that little spirit to come up. There's I think there's kind of like levels to life, and there's energy can screw up the different levels or leak a level into another level or attach a level into another level. And Black Friday really is the whole theme of Black Friday. I won't write a novel if the people aren't totally trapped. If a person can, I read so many novels and watch so many novels where like a person can just drive or walk away, right? Like, all right, if you're being chased by a guy with a knife and you're in the woods, just head west. I mean, just keep going. I mean, you can get away. So Black Friday is really no different than the Invasive and the Polar. The Polar was Matt Kearns being trapped in a 10-acre radius by an invisible creature. So every time you'd hit that line, you'd pull it back. The Invasive was the entire Apex Valley was hemmed in by a full ecosystem invasion, so the characters couldn't go anywhere. And in Black Friday, the mall is cut off from our known reality by a cliff surrounding the mall in fog. So the characters can't go anywhere. So while these characters are completely trapped and completely screwed, there's all this energy bubbling up around them in the discombobulation. So sometimes these little voices come up in that. Little spirit voices or little inner voices.
It did remind me of The Mist a little bit,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, yeah. However, the creatures in Black Friday are benign. They're not. It's like, again, the Mist. As good as the Mist is all just super predators. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nothing friendly that comes out of the Mist, which again is not really science friendly, because science would indicate that there would be an entire ecosystem, so you're going to get friendly creatures as well as unfriendly ones if you open the vortex to another world.
Well, see...
So the creatures... Go ahead.
Well, I definitely get a feeling of malevolence from the creatures in the Mist, though. In the same way that I would get a feeling of malevolence from a scorpion or, I don't know, a camel spider, these almost otherworldly looking creatures that you have a hard time believing are real,
Right.
I definitely get a feeling of malevolence, and also, from the creatures in Black Friday and Invasive, I don't get a sense of being benign from them, but...
the little opossum in the Invasive that has the collar, the flashing red tag on it, like the little... And the bird, there's a bird in the Invasive that actually helps save them at the end of it a bit. So, I mean, it depends. Like, when I write stuff, like, I think a lot of it's just funny. Mm-hmm. And then people will read it and be like, I wanted to kill myself after I read this. It was so bleak. I'm just like, really? I laughed during that part. So it's like my perception of what is malevolent and what's not is slightly skewed. So I tend to steer towards really bleak. So.
Now, after Black Friday, didn't you have a book of short stories called The Glimmering?
Yeah, The Gloaming.
Gloaming.
Yeah,
what is gloaming?
Actually, that's spelled Glaom, like the Radiohead song.
Oh, okay. And this,
gloaming,
and what were you going to say about that?
Oh, I just put that one together. I enjoyed it. It's got some pretty cool stories in it. I think it's like 16 of them, 16 short stories.
And then I find out about this one that you released last summer quietly that I had no idea about, The Last Colossus, which it's set more in a tropical region, right?
Yeah, it's set off the coast of Washington State in the Pacific Northwest, and it's about the last megalodon. And a group of 20-somethings end up going to this small island party, and they get caught between a lava flow and this shark offshore.
What exactly was megalodon? Refresh my memory.
It was a giant prehistoric shark, like 4 to 5 times the size of a great white.
What did it eat primarily?
Oh, it ate whales and things of that size, and it was really the way it hunted was different from the great white. It would use just speed in just a punishing knockout blow to the spine of what it was hunting, rather than just tearing away chunks at it.
Uh-huh.
So really, just just a devastating hunter.
So a shark that eats whales.
Yeah. And porpoises and anything else like that.
So what chance do the protagonists of The Last Colossus have against a shark that eats whales? And has lived for hundreds of years.
they're basically they're on the island, and the island is, the island's erupting. So they're forced into the ocean. Again, I don't like writing books where people can just drive or walk away or motor away. So they're forced into the ocean, where the megalodon has been hunting for the last year or so. And so there's a raft, and they're getting picked off one by one. So they really don't have a chance. And if you read the book, you'll find out.
Have you heard of the?
They're really kind of screwed.
Well, have you heard of the helicoprion?
No, I have not.
That's a pretty vicious beast from that from the prehistoric times. I think it had
cool.
a jaw that would unfold. It had these jagged teeth in its jaw, and they would like unfold like an accordion out of its mouth.
Oh my gosh!
At least according to the picture I saw, that's what it reminded me of. Accordion jaws, and it was a carnivore, and it was. I would say it would provide a decent challenge to a megalodon, if not an outright victory. And also, mosasaurs might offer a good challenge to megalodons too. You heard of them?
Yeah, I actually have. Yeah.
There's a lot of things.
There's
a lot of things in the ocean that, I mean, the ocean is, I mean, it's hell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I'm up here.
What is the most unnerving predator that you can think of in the ocean, like for real?
It's gotta. I mean, to me, it's gotta be a tiger or a great white, and being just out at sea, helpless in the water while that's swimming around you. That's to me the worst.
Well, see, to me, I'm thinking of the deep, deep depths, like the 18 feet Japanese spider crabs, the giant isopods that are like giant pill bugs. Now, I mean, if you could somehow lure them up several hundred feet, they would probably implode. But, I mean, can you imagine being on the ocean floor with these just visions of hell?
No, I don't. Yeah, it's like I'm just glad to be on land where it's sunny and warm. I don't want to be down there.
Right. Did you say that there is an accompanying book to The Invasive coming out in just a few days?
Yeah, it's actually called Invasive Pulse, Pulse, and it's a novella that's the prequel to Invasive 1 and Invasive 2. So that I think that series, that world has got maybe a couple more books left in it.
Excellent. Now, Invasive 2 is not out yet, as far as I know.
It's out.
It is?
Yes, Colebrook's on the cover.
Sorry, I got to check it out here.
Yeah, no problem.
How did I miss this? The Invasive 2 Remnants. Yeah, there it is. So that's about what I envisioned that character to look like. Who did the cover?
Yeah. What's that?
Who did the cover?
Severed Press.
Okay. Speaking of Severed Press, I'm very impressed with their operation. They're filling a niche that Sci-Fi Channel attempted to, and in some ways failed, and that's producing like legitimately entertaining science fiction creature feature pulp. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, you know what? I do too. It's fun, and they take risks. Severed Press takes risks, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I think another novel from them I read recently, not to butt into your promotion or anything, but Vietnam Black by Brad well, I don't remember his name, but it was about a giant black centipede in Vietnam, and I mean that one reminds me more of Predator than anything I've ever read, but it's a giant centipede, and so that's entertaining. And they've
I've seen the cover. It looks pretty good. It looks like a good story.
And Severed Press has flirted with steampunk, with Clockwork Universe. And I mean, they just got a lot of quality reads out, and they're filling that niche that the sci-fi creature features just begin to hint at. You know.
Yeah, they do, and it's like they've got a pretty broad lineup, and they take some risks, and you know they don't mind picking up stuff that blurs genres, which is pretty cool because it's kind of there's a lot of unique stuff you can grab from them.
Well, this has been a real pick-me-up to find out that there's a sequel, and it was right there waiting for how long? Since last August. Wow.
Yeah, last August.
How did I miss that? I got to get on a newsletter or some kind of update.
You can join my mailing list.
Okay, great.
MichaelHodgesFiction.com.
What? MichaelHodgesFiction.com.
Yep.
Okay, great. I will do
and
that.
That takes you right to my official website, and my official Facebook page is on there as well. So it's all in one easy little place.
Excellent. I will definitely do that. We were talking earlier about the lore of the outdoors, different legends that hunters and hikers and such amass, and they tell in tents and around campfires. Have you ever heard this story that Theodore Roosevelt wrote about in The Wilderness Hunter called Bauman's Bigfoot?
I have not heard of that actually yet.
That's surprising because it would be right up your alley. Maybe you could reference it in a future book, if you look into it. But basically, Roosevelt was not... I mean, he was a very knowledgeable man, not just in terms of warfare, strategy, politics, and the outdoors, but he also was fairly, intellectual. And so he wasn't typically given to tales of superstition and boogeymen, but he was told a story by these trappers during his early days, and they impressed upon him in such a way that he felt obligated to write about it in The Wilderness Hunter later on. And it told of a trapper, who had been found in his bedroll, like with crushed bones in a way that no animal, not even a bear, could have done. And I don't remember what became of the guy's traveling partner who survived to tell the tale, but it had been passed down through several, factions of, the outdoors people. And,
fascinating.
Yeah, you got to look into this, man. Bauman's Bigfoot, Bauman, and I think you could probably do something with it, update it or something.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, but I mean, Theodore Roosevelt, he was a man's man. I mean, he was not only smart in terms of navigation and survival,
right.
but also he was fairly intellectually good of thinking on his feet too. So
I mean, the thing is that he had really, really good grasp of big picture, like big picture. So much so that he protected all this public land for generations.
Yeah, I believe that he had, through executive orders, he had managed to preserve at least 100,000 different acres of land across the United States, and I guess that may have that probably played a hand in today's park system, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's just so important in general. I mean, drinking water for 100 million Americans comes from national forests and national parks, and he was so integral in all of that, and he just had a big. I mean, you can't. There's a lot of people who are into hunting and fishing and the outdoors, and the way if you read the Polar, you realize that the way the outdoors work is that everything. There's layers to it. There's levels to it, and Theodore Roosevelt knew this, and that's why he protected what he protected. You have your wilderness area or your roadless area, and these are areas that are 5,000 acres or more without a road. Roads are what humans build, and when humans build roads, everything that we do comes with the roads. cabins, houses, malls, skyscrapers, wherever, you name it, development comes in. And so Roosevelt knew that you couldn't have that everywhere, there'd be no balance. So he protected these roadless wilderness areas, and then it protected the outdoor integrity, it protected water quality, it protected endangered species, it protected, hunters' rights, it protected fishing rights. It just has this sweeping effect across the land of having a higher quality of life. And so that's how big picture he had.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are just content. They wake up, they have breakfast, they go to their job, they go shopping, they come back home, they go to sleep. Theodore Roosevelt saw 100, 200, 300 years down the road, and he saw cities taking over the entire U.S. and sprawl taking over the U.S., and he said, fuck no.
Mm-hmm.
That's how big picture that guy was.
Yeah, I'd say we're about due for another Roosevelt. It would be something.
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of the few dynasties I wouldn't mind seeing a return of. But as far as endangered species, if you could save any endangered species, but it could only be one endangered species, and be allocated all the resources you would ever need in order to pull it off, what would be most worth saving in your eyes?
Wow, that's a really tough question. I think for me personally, I like the wolverine and I like the grizzly bear and I love lynx. I'm a big outdoors person. I was just out filming moose and bears up in Glacier. But I think when I think of canaries in the coal mine, I think of polar bears.
I thought you were going to say that, actually.
Yeah, I think that when you lose the species at the tip of the polar caps, I think the human race is one step closer to being fucked.
Hmm. And that photograph is so powerful. When it's either in the water with no land to pull itself up on, or it's on like an archipelago or a glacier, just like broken away. I can't remember if it's in the water or just on a separate thing with nowhere to turn, but whichever it was, It was powerful.
Very powerful, yeah. And it's like the whole thing about endangered species is it's not just about, I love animals and I love that species. It's more about, those are the canaries in the coal mine, man. And we're animals too. Mm-hmm. And when those species start going, it's somewhere along the line, we're in there. We're in that list. So
when you say canaries in the coal mine, what do they signal for?
They signal the collapse of an ecosystem. When you start losing indicator species, that means that the quality and the health of an ecosystem is declining. And so when people forget that we're also part of an ecosystem. So it's like being in a restaurant, and it's busy and it's bustling and it's a great restaurant. And as you eat dinner, you just notice everyone around you slowly starts disappearing. And eventually 2 hours in, you're the last table, right? Mm-hmm. And you're next. You're disappearing next. So the species on this planet are just a long list of things that survive here, and we're on that list. So if we don't keep other animals and species intact, we're not going to stay intact. We're just going to be Mad Max, Mm-hmm. Deserts and warlords and scrapyards. So
some people might prefer that, but I know of at least two species that would probably welcome the collapse of the polar bears, and I guess that would be penguins and walruses, right?
Yeah, because they don't want to be killed by them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've actually seen a video of a colony of walruses making a formation in defense in front of baby walruses, protecting the young, building a wall against this polar bear who was desperate for food. And it's I felt sorry for both sides. I didn't know who to root for.
Yeah, dude, that's true. That's just an accurate picture of nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we got a lot of quality content out of this discussion.
Good deal.
So I've got my homework assignment, and you got yours. Mine is Invasive 2 and Pulse, and also Last Colossus. And yours would be Bauman's Bigfoot story that Roosevelt wrote about. And also look into this David Paulides guy who writes about mysterious disappearances in and around national parks.
That sounds fascinating to me. I appreciate the recommendation.
Awesome. Well, I really enjoy your work, Michael, and I still recommend The Puller to this day. I talked about it last episode, in fact, I believe. I just, it really spoke to me, like the little voice did to Matthew. So.
Oh, thanks so much. I greatly appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and have a great rest of the weekend, friend.
All right, you too, man.
All right.
That they were going to protest the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, except when they put the press notice out, they had left the name blank, indicating that they had planned to put this out regardless of who was nominated.
That is hilarious. It's like I remember hearing that Rolling Stone magazine or Spin magazine had an obituary written up years in advance for Lane Staley of Alice in Chains, and also possibly Scott Weiland of Stone Temple Pilots. They just had obituaries written up just in the can, just waiting for the inevitable. And it's funny that these guys also that had this hit piece, in the can as well, so. Okay, today I would like very much to speak as little as possible about 3 words: Supreme Court Justice. I'm tired of hearing about it. One side's acting like it's Jesus Christ, this Kavanaugh character, Jesus Kavanaugh, and the other side is acting like he's the Antichrist, or Kavanaugh, the Prince of Darkness. I'm tired of it. No one is saving or damning the world by one Supreme Court justice. And if the world has withstood the decades of Ruth Bader Ginsburg occupying a seat, then I'm sure that we can withstand however long Kavanaugh is in that seat. Get over it, guys. Okay? Just get over it. This is exhausting. People are getting burned out. People are throwing their friendships, relationships, family members on some vast funeral pyre as like a political bonfire, and it's insane. Get over it. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if you're not going to help the guy running directly beside you, at least don't, outright trip him, or don't make it too obvious. So anyway, I see that this Me Too movement, and Ben, you may be a little softer on this. I personally have no tolerance for this thing that is blown up. I think it's disgusting. I think these women are predatory. And I'm not saying that some of them can't be telling the truth. But the way that they're all just jumping on at once, it very much robs them of credibility. The way they can wait decades to finally seize on this, I don't like it at all. You or I could very well be Me Too quite easily. And I think that it's poetic justice that people like Brianna Wu are now being quote-unquote Me Too'd. For what? For liking social media posts that are provocative of other girls. This is insanity, man. Now I see Maynard James Keenan of Tool is being accused by 2 different fans who apparently one of them found her way onto the bus, and she had no agency or control over him putting the move on her, quote unquote. And then I see Maynard come out and deny these accusations outright. And what does he end with? He doesn't end with, this lady's lying, although he says that in so many words. He says, this is a terrible blow for the Me Too movement. So he completely misses the point. it's the movement itself that is the problem, not this one woman. Because if it can be done to him, he can be lied about, if he's being lied about, if he can be lied about, how many others can be lied about? Weinstein probably is the pig he has been portrayed to be. I don't doubt that. And if he did threaten Salma Hayek's life while they were on set, then yeah, he deserves all that's coming to him. That's different. But and then I see professional wrestling. Some fans and female wrestlers are coming out, and I mean it's becoming a literal witch hunt. There, I said it. Let me have it.
I somewhat agree with you. I agree that it's conflating a lot of different things. Like with Weinstein, he's like accused of actual felony rape, like literal rape. No, no ambiguity about that.
I can believe it. He looks like the type of guy that is a complete sleaze, like a Jabba the Hutt thing with like a lamprey-like mouths that suction, on his belly. I could just see that. If he opened up his chest, you'd probably find lamprey mouths. He looks disgusting. I can believe him. But every man who ever lived, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with it. They can sort of conflate the actual like little rape with literal rape of Weinstein with some other things that are still serious, but are not actual rape, like Terry Crews being like a sort of male version of that. Terry Crews being grabbed by a bigwig at a party. Kevin Spacey trying to come onto a 14-year-old, things like that. Those are definitely serious things, but it does get conflated with things like I like being a douche, basically. Because you know who Daniel Handler is?
No.
He writes under the pen name Lemony Snicket.
Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yeah, and he's also written books under his real name. He got caught up in that because he made some inappropriate jokes, saying things like to like a female colleague. He said things like events for children's books always turn into orgies and things like that. And it's kind of douchey, but something that you deserve to be conflated with like Weinstein and company. That's pretty ridiculous. And yeah, the more ridiculous ones are like where you mentioned that, because I just sort of heard about the Brianna Wu thing where she apparently liked someone's social media posts and they tried to put her in the Me Too thing because of that. And Aziz, the Indian comedian, like apparently being too forward with a date, that getting conflated with that strikes me as pretty ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're reaching a point where it's not even full on, physical contact, like, bodies, intermeshed or anything. It's just like a nudge or something that's becoming swept up in this Me Too thing. I mean, that woman came out and said that Dan Rather snuck up and tickled her, and she made that part of her, the centerpiece of her argument that she had been, assaulted or abused or harassed by this guy. And I think that one died down pretty quick because, I mean, I think we can agree that tickling is not abuse. And let me ask you this, because how far does this go? I mean, I used to have this friend, and he always was kind of clingy at times when we hung out. It wasn't often, but every now and then he would get kind of weird. And at one time, he kind of, when I was talking to him, and like joking around or something, I don't remember what about, but he kind of, gently grabbed my arm and kind of ran his hand up it. Now, would that qualify me for Me Too, or should I just dismiss it as, who the fuck knows what was going on, but who the fuck cares? I don't even talk to the guy anymore. Does that make me qualify for Me Too? I don't know what it was. To this day, I didn't care enough to ask him, because we were good friends, and nothing ever came of it, you know. So, I mean, Terry Crews, you ask me, he should have never taken that to the press. He should have remained a man, manned up and just said, oh, well, whatever, or he could have told the guy to back off, the suit who grabbed him, whatever. What's he gonna do if he tells him no? I mean, isn't he? I'm sure that he's more physically imposing than whoever this executive or CEO is that grabbed him, right? I mean,
right. The thing is, like with Hollywood, this apparently has been going on for a while, where like the bigwigs, like borderline have carte blanche to do that kind of thing. So
casting couches, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, somewhat casting couches, and some other times where it's like there's no consent. They just think that they can just do what they want because of their position. So I do think there is that it's a good thing that that's kind of being being pushed aside, even if it is sort of a case of privileged people, actors against other privileged people, Hollywood bigwigs. But yeah, I mean, my own bias says that. Yeah, like people who are in positions of power think they could just get away with shit. I'm perfectly happy to see them get their comeuppance.
There are people in positions of power who believe they can get away with anything, absolutely. But there are also people with no power who believe they can get away with anything, as evidenced by these professional victims in the last year. Would you agree?
To an extent, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, anonymity to an extent gives you that. Like the ability to slide under the radar if you do something shitty.
Would you agree that, as it has been often said, that for every action there is an opposing reaction?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I think.
Okay. Then I would like to propose at this time, for anyone listening, to help me get #NothingHappened trending on Twitter. And Ben, I hope you don't hate me for that, but I think that I think it's healthy for public discourse that we start standing up to this. If for no other reason than to strengthen the credibility of actual victims. This is dangerous, man. Tickling, liking a provocative pic. Why did the chick even put it out there if she didn't want Brianna Wu or anyone else liking the post? This is some weird, sick shit, man. This is weirder than the actual harassment accusations. That's just how I feel.
Yeah, I can see that. And personally, I just don't know because, like I said, I think the Me Too thing started off well, but it has been sort of used as a bludgeon. Like I said, it conflates people who are kind of douchey and probably deserve censor with others who, not like having their careers destroyed, just like censor, like you're a dick, and even people who probably really didn't do anything wrong in most other situations. If they were like anyone else, it conflates people like that with the actual rapists. Which, is not an attitude that should be fostered.
Well, something else. I mean, I was touched by another kid in kindergarten. Should I trudge that up now and guilt trip him? He could have a family or run a business or something. Should I go and burn everything that in his reputation to the ground because in kindergarten, he did something that neither of us understood, and it was like just for a split second? I mean, and I think he was punished for it anyway. Should I now burn everything that he is to the ground? And I'm not saying I'm a victim. I'm saying it happened. I remember it happened, and I don't care now. Why would I bring it up 30 years later, other than to illustrate this point that I think that we're, like you said, conflating things that don't really qualify for this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm sure if I was a woman, I might have a somewhat different attitude just because I would probably have it more often. But yeah, I have had cases of like gay guys or and even women in bars, like, touching me when I didn't really want them to. I don't I don't hold any ill will to those people, and I think the idea of like trying to you know, expose them or shame them publicly would be, you know, ridiculous and in some ways unnecessarily cruel.
Well, get this. I remember somewhere a while back. I remember seeing some tweet from a gay guy, like a flagrant, like flaming, openly homo, which whatever. I mean, I don't. It doesn't rub me the wrong way or anything as far as that. But I mean, he was very vocal, very militant, I guess is the word. And he actually said something about how, when heteros come into a gay bar, you're entering our world. And, you were there to be poked and prodded. I think it was something along those lines. I think the guy's last name was Champion. I don't know. Maybe I just doxed him. I don't care. But that was the attitude that he displayed. And I wonder how that tweet holds up now in light of all this shit that I'm sure he's a sob sister with all his girlfriends and fellow gays and everything. I'm sure that he's fallen into line with the Me Too and all this other shit, and I just wonder how that tweet would hold up now if someone exposed it, brought up some of the skeletons in his own closet, where he says you are there to be poked and prodded if you're a hetero in a gay bar.
Does he mean like literally or figuratively?
I think I got the impression he meant heavy flirting, not actual penetration, but just heavy flirting, maybe an ass slap, something like that. The same thing that basically I got my little female friend to say was not a big deal right here on this show several episodes back, and yet the small press critters, still call me a groper, even though she's totally fine, with me occasionally putting my hands on her.
Right, because I remember for a short period, it was sort of a thing with the, I don't know what you call them, stuff like Miss Magazine and Jezebel and all those sort of, which are basically like supposedly feminist magazines, but they're basically just gossip magazines for semi-affluent urban women, and urban as in women who live in cities, not black women. But it was sort of a thing among them to complain about gay men grabbing them in gay bars and things like that.
Gay men grabbing women in gay bars?
Yeah, because I guess there were some women who hang around gay guys that are okay with that because they're gay and it doesn't mean anything. But
I don't get that. That scrambled my brains a little bit. Gay men in gay bars grabbing women that are also gay, or straight women, or both?
Straight women.
Okay, why? And something else. I mean, I've known some people who were more inclined to go to gay bars, either because they were more fun in their eyes, or they got along better with those people. What is the attraction what would be the attraction with these women going to gay bars to get grabbed?
I guess that they weren't specifically going to get grabbed, but I mean, I've been at gay bars with female friends before, and the reason to go is just because they tend to be pretty chill places, and they don't have to worry about getting hit on.
Apparently they do, though. I mean, if this is true, apparently they do have to worry about it. I just can't wrap my head around that. They're gay, but they hit on women. Do the women look like men? No, because they're straight. I don't know.
No, all right. Not hit on them, just like grab them because they're trying to be playful and things like that.
Is it more of a joshing around, like a horseplay?
Yeah, I guess that's what it is.
So there is no sexual connotation to it? And we're talking in broad strokes here. We're talking in broad implications, not an individual incident.
Pretty much. It's obviously something I can't say I understand, because it's one of those complaints that I probably would have to be like a upper middle class rich woman in like a bigger city who goes to gay bars on a regular basis to have any sort of grasp on. Like it's something that probably only like affects that specific demographic, the kind of people who like read Jezebel and so forth religiously.
Jezebel, that's sounds vaguely familiar.
It's one of the it was one of the Gawker properties before Gawker went under, and now all those are owned by Univision. I think Univision's actually trying to sell them now.
Didn't Jezebel? Isn't that the one that burned down the alt lit community?
That was partially, yeah. I mean, I remember what the thing that happened with that with the drama between I don't know what they're going by today, but that back when they were still writing, they went by the name Ellen Kennedy. They came out as a trans man, so I don't know what they call themselves now, but there was he came out with that they had slept together while she was still technically underage and things like that. And Talon has talked about this explicitly, and Richard Yates, but they acted like it was a surprise, and Kennedy, he actually contacted them and said, can you take down the stuff about me and Talon? Like, you don't know what happened between us. And they pretty much ignored her.
I remember that. I do remember that. Would you believe I actually found that episode from the old Surreal Sermon show where I kind of shined a light on that stuff when everyone else was afraid to. If I had done that, if I had covered that today, I would have gone on it so much harder. But I remember. So she brought it up in the first place, or he, and then not retracted, but said, hey guys, cool off, I got this. But nothing ever came of it, did it?
No, I don't think Jezebel, I think they ignored Kennedy, but they actually, I think they put up a statement from either Talon or Talon's lawyer or something like that, which is, kind of shitty of them. Yeah, the thing with like the Olive thing, because I won't say his name, but his initials are STD. He apparently was an actual creeper, and that was like the catalyst of the whole alt-lit thing going down in flames.
If I guessed a book he wrote, would you tell me?
I'm pretty sure he didn't actually write any books. He was primarily an editor, I think.
I thought you were talking about the guy who wrote The Oregon Trail is the Oregon Trail.
No, I don't know who that is, but
hang on, I'm looking at it right. Okay, Gregory Sherrill. That was Gregory Sherrill. Never mind. Well, I know that he caught some shit too.
And yeah, I don't remember him.
Around that time, So,
like I say, his initials are STD.
I'm sure I'll figure it out later. Yeah, I'm sure I'll figure it out later. I do remember some guy named Steven getting caught up in that. I don't know if that's him, but wait, his initials are STD?
Yeah. Took you a minute to pick up on that.
Oh, are you okay? So you're bullshitting me, or is that really his initials?
Yeah, those are really his initials.
Oh man, that guy caught it. That guy did not catch a break.
No.
Jesus. So what is this you wanted to talk about with the new manual of psychiatric disorders? I know that every year there is an official, I don't know, reviewing. Okay.
It's the diagnostic manual. They recently released the new one. I can't remember which one it is, what number it's at. But two of the things that kind of made headlines when it came out was one, transgenderism was no longer considered a mental disorder. They moved that from a mental disorder to being a sexual health issue, and they also recognized gaming addiction as a disease.
Oh, come on.
Reading reading about those things kind of, got me thinking again, because this is something I've been concerned about for a while now. I became concerned about it when I first read some of Thomas Zaz's work. He most famously wrote a book called The Myth of Mental Illness, where he writes that what's considered mental illnesses are not illnesses in the same way that like a cancer or flu could be considered a disease. And he argues that essentially that the way psychiatry is organized, it's almost like the way priests were treated in medieval times, where it's an idea we can consider so and so unclean. We stigmatize them by calling them mentally ill, and we can commit them, force them to take medication and things like that. And he, argued that we needed to get rid of that approach and take a individual approach and treat what's considered mental illness as problems in living. And recently I started reading some of Michel Foucault's work. Foucault was a major figure in the quote-unquote postmodern movement. And given that like Jordan Peterson and people like that are throwing around postmodern as like a slur, basically, they got me interested in actually looking at some of the people. And he actually argues the same thing in his own approach of psychology, that the way we treat people who are quote unquote mentally ill are basically the same way we treat people who the way lepers were treated back in medieval times. And it's an interesting interesting kind of way to look at things. That Foucault himself, he was a homosexual, and growing up in like the 50s and 60s, that obviously resulted in a lot of stigmatization. And of course, homosexuality used to be considered a mental illness. And it's also interesting to like compare Thomas Zaz and Foucault, because Zaz, he took a pretty scientific approach, and he argued things from a sort of classical liberal viewpoint. He was associated with the Libertarian Party and things like that. He was very pro-free market, very on board with getting rid of the drug war. And Foucault, Foucault was a radical leftist French radical leftist who supported like the 60s revolution and things like that. But they both came to very similar, and Foucault also took like a cultural anthropological viewpoint, but they both came to similar conclusions on mental illness and how it's treated.
Well, surely there will always be people who do require being locked away, right? I mean, if they're unable to interact with the public in a way that honors the social contract of respecting people's.
Yeah, Zaz's approach was to just treat them like you do like a criminal, not that you can just declare someone is insane and put them in an asylum without them actually committing any sort of crime. And Foucault, he had a skepticism towards any kind of institute like that. He often noted the similarities between asylums, schools, government buildings, and prisons themselves, in the way they're constructed and the way they're ran.
Yeah, those asylums used to be just 20 people to a room, just beds in every square inch, people crammed together and probably smeared in their own feces and urine. The asylums have at least progressed from that, I would hope.
Yeah, they've progressed from that, but there's still the problem of committing people against their will and the stigmatization.
Yeah, how
people mentally ill.
How it only takes one or two signatures to get someone committed and told that they need to be evaluated or something. Is it one or two signatures?
I actually don't know. I've never looked into that. I definitely have to check that out. But I know there have been like cases of people, pretending to have problems so they can get into and see how easy it is to get committed, and they got committed relatively quickly, and they, had trouble, getting out through the normal channels because, they can't just say, hey, I'm not actually mentally ill.
Well, I used to have this uncle who would periodically check in, and I never understood why he would check in, but eventually he would check himself out, and I don't think he was ever a problem with them. I think he just went for, to visit, not to live, But yeah, I never did figure out why he would do that periodically, but he did. Maybe when things got to be too much, that's how he would cope. But yeah, I have a problem with now. I'm not making this statement just from what I've seen in the movies, but I've observed real and heard real snippets of audio from orderlies who are very aggressive and pushy with these vulnerable people in asylums, and that's always disturbed me. And don't laugh, but one example came at the end of a Sublime album. I don't know if you remember that, but this orderly is getting real pushy with this guy who's ranting on a tape he's recording in his room, and he says, you better cool it down now, and then he steps into his room when he says, I'm gonna fucking kill you, and the orderly steps into his room and says, oh really, what are you gonna do about it, you fucking wimp? I mean, and this was used and as like an outro for a Sublime album, but it was from a genuine like asylum or facility of some sort. And I've observed that this kind of harsh attitude with a lot of orderlies, in my limited, interactions with this sort of thing. And that I would think that would be a problem. I realize orderlies have to put on this front so that they're respected, but I think they take it. I'm sure they take it too far.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. There's there's a sort of like again going back to football, comparing asylums and prisons. I'm sure prison guards develop similar attitudes, and to a lesser extent, people who teach in school develop similar attitudes.
Yeah, I used to have this burning resentment for, shall we say, institutions, prisons and jails and such. And I still do to a degree. I guess that's why I don't break the law, so I don't ever have to experience it. But when I dated this ex-con, and I hope I'm not getting off topic here, but I used to date this ex-con, and she was constantly in trouble and had been in extensive trouble. And I used to try to be like overly protective of her, like she was unable to make her own decisions. Well, clearly she wasn't, because she's back in prison now, and I don't talk to her anymore. I don't answer her letters. But I used to just have this burning resentment for the things that happen when you go inside, whether it be asylums, or rehab centers, or jails, prisons, whatever. The strip searches, squatting and coughing for complete strangers, that always terrified me. And the whole shackles and belly chains and leg irons and all this, it's like I used to like spend an inordinate amount of my time every day obsessing over how this could fit in a civilized society. But then again, think of the monsters that those things are used to corral. Not all of them, but a good deal of them. And yeah, I can get on board with how there might need to be reforms there. I mean, Jesus, when you're rationing toilet paper to these people who have no, who have no access to outside products, what else are they going to do but, try to riot? I mean,
right, exactly.
Does that make any sense there? Did I kind of take it in another direction there?
No, it's a somewhat tangential, but it still makes sense the way we set up institutions to uh, well to civilize people, and I use civilization in the most negative way possible, like the idea of the institutions that exist to I guess hammer people to fit the mold.
Hmm. So what were
Uh,
there any other disorders or I don't know,
those were the two
truncated
that I
or
thought of. Those
okay.
were the two that I thought of. But one thing that I kind of feel embarrassed that I didn't know about earlier was that the DSM they vote to decide what's going to go in that.
Hmm.
It's not a very scientific process. It's based on voting. They vote what's going to be stay a mental illness and what isn't, and they give people pills based on this.
Yeah. Um. Hmm.
It's something to definitely be concerned about. It's a big reason why things like transgenderism and homosexuality are not considered diseases anymore. It's because people voted.
Hmm. What do you think they are?
Uh, are they diseases? They I don't think that they're diseases um, like homosexuality. It's I think it's being primarily attracted to the same sex is a quote unquote deviation in the sense only in the sense that it's not what the majority of people do.
Yeah. If it
And
were a
like going
disease, they couldn't live comfortably with it. I mean, but they can live comfortably with it. Uh, Probably more now than ever, no matter what they say. I mean, but if it were a disease, they wouldn't be able to. Right? I mean,
right, and that's a and of course there's the line between how for the longest time like homosexuality was not an identity that people held. There were like ancient Greece, for example, it wasn't unusual for someone to be married and have children and still engage in homosexual activity on a regular basis.
yeah. Some of the greatest minds were homosexual. I have friends who are homosexual, but they don't shun me when I bust their balls a little bit, break their balls, by joking, or I mean it's some of the people on the left really need to chill, they're getting as bad as the Bible bashing right in the 90s. They've come full circle and they're just as bad as they were now,
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention that's somewhat tangential. It's the idea of you sometimes like occasionally you'll hear like a psychiatrist or whatever who's trying to make a name for themselves by saying, "Oh, I've diagnosed Donald Trump as having this and whatever, or this public figure as having this." That's actually a straight up violation of the American Psychiatric Association's ethic guidelines.
Really?
They
What
have
about
a
HIPAA? What about the Hippocratical oath?
a Hippocratic oath. That's somewhat another thing.
Okay.
I don't. It doesn't necessarily. Well, I would argue it does, but under the do no harm rule, it doesn't necessarily harm to say so and so has a disease, but if you consider mental illness a disease. But That's a rule called the Goldwater Rule, named after Barry Goldwater, because when Barry Goldwater was running for president, some of his opposition actually got a bunch of psychiatrists to come out and say, Goldwater is mentally unfit to be president, and so they sort of realized that this does not this should not fit that this is very unethical. That one, these people have not sat down and actually diagnosed Barry Goldwater, so they cannot come out and say he is not mentally fit to do this or this. Uh, and they, of course, even if you do like sit down with someone to diagnose them, a doctor-patient confidentiality would say that they can't come out and say it anyway.
Hmm.
Um,
Has anyone ever
but
challenged that when they do that on television?
uh, I don't know if they receive any like formal censure or anything like that, but yeah, they are. Just keep that in mind whenever you hear a psychiatrist talking about a public figure. They are violating the APA's own ethical
Well,
guidelines.
serving someone up for some kind of publicity or some kind of exchange of, I don't know, something, without that person's consent. So yeah, I mean that makes sense. Don't know if it would apply in the same way for the sitting president, but being the leader of the free world, or commander in chief, certainly doesn't exclude you from the most basic of rights. Certainly, there have been plenty of guys that were unfit to be president who wound up in the seat. Would you say Andrew Jackson was mentally unfit to be president?
I have no idea. Like, if I only have a bachelor's in psychology, so obviously I have zero qualifications to make any sort of formal diagnosis. But
That's a good answer.
If I were to just like, of course, maybe I could say, oh, I think he's I might since looking more into this, I've started to rethink like trying to just dismiss people by saying they're quote mentally unfit because I may as well be saying that they're a heretic or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else on that front?
I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I started looking more into this, getting more interested in it, so I thought it'd be interesting to share what some of the things I've been looking into.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the Star Wars franchise is declining? We're seeing it in decline. This Solo film just bombed.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of a backlash against it, and people are saying, "Oh, it's because the fandom is toxic, and they hate women and nah." The other day I was thinking about the movie because when I first initially watched it, I thought, oh, that was okay, but it's one of those movies, like, the more I thought about it, the more problems I found with it. And I decided to look to see who actually wrote it. I was surprised that the director was the only writer on it because thinking back on The Last Jedi, it really does come across like it was written by 10 different people with different visions of what they wanted to do with it.
See, a lot of people had the problem with The Last Jedi. I did not have a problem with it.
I definitely don't think it's the worst movie in the franchise, but it's definitely got a lot of problems, and I can see why the fans didn't like it.
Somebody needs to make a GIF of Luke drinking that alien milk and like acting like it was the first beer he's had in years or something. Yeah, somebody needs to really clip that. I don't know why it just worked.
I remember seeing a comic that took that, and like there's also that scene where with Kylo Ren without his shirt on, like someone made a comic where Luke milks Kylo Ren.
I liked the conflicted nature of Luke in this one, and I liked that he was a front and central character and not just aiding in the changing of the guard by training Rey. I liked that he was a large part of what made that movie work, and seeing him like spearfish for alien trout or whatever it is, and having that ghost visitation with Yoda, and I did not have many problems with The Last Jedi, but some people are spinning it that Solo was caught in some backlash because they filled in these details after the fact for a character that was several decades old, with that being Lando was suddenly pansexual when pansexual wasn't a thing back when Star Wars was made before. It wasn't a thing. So why would it be a thing now where it's supposed to be a prequel, okay? So what, did he forget it when he's kissing Leia's hand and giving her these very, physically charged glances and being all gentlemanly and saying, my lady and everything, when he first meets her in the Cloud City in Empire Strikes Back? Explain that one to me.
Yeah, there's a kind of funny thing about that, because when that came out, that, Lando is pansexual in Solo, my first reaction was, by pansexual, I mean they're going to mention it in press releases for hype or whatever, and it's not going to factor into the movie.
What does it have to do with the plot? Why? What? It's just PR.
I didn't watch Solo, but apparently, it has nothing to do with the plot. The whole pansexual thing came from the fact that apparently he has like a semi-romantic relationship with a droid or something like that.
How does that work? Oh, he's got a. So there are sex dolls in Star Wars now. Is that it?
I don't know if it's a sex doll from the picture.
Lando is not pans. If it's a sex doll, Lando isn't a pansexual. He's a MGTOW.
Yeah,
Come
on. The droids in Star Wars aren't very sexy when you think about it.
One Star Wars movie that I think my least favorite of all, Rogue One, did not feel like a Star Wars movie at all. Didn't even have the scrolling text at the beginning. I did not like Rogue One, and what was it? Forrest Whitaker, he even seemed out of place. He seemed like he was like a bad pantomime job. He seemed goofy. The whole thing just seemed goofy to me. It just didn't feel like a real Star Wars movie. I know that the whole thing is built around Admiral Akbar saying, in I guess A New Hope, he says there were many casualties, right? It was based around that, right?
Yeah, I actually kind of like Rogue One, even if it meant that my favorite expanded universe video game is now out of the picture, because that one was at Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. I love that game when I was a kid, and one of the big parts of the plot is that you play the smuggler Dash Rendar, who in retrospect is basically just a dollar store version of Han Solo, but I liked him, and he there's a big part of the game where you do steal the plans for the Death Star.
I've been waiting so long to see a Star Wars movie with Shizor in it, and I'm beginning to wonder if it will ever come.
Yeah, I don't know. Zero, that was the name of the villain in the Shadows of the Empire. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they pretty much just ignored the existence of that.
Well, the expanded universe doesn't count anymore. It's no longer canon.
Right. I've always just sort of taken it for granted that a expanded universe was never canon, because there's just too much. You can't make anything coherent out of that.
The very concept of canon is kind of strange if you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah, especially with something like Star Wars, which for the longest time was in fact just 3 movies.
The idea of canon... Well, go ahead.
And some would argue that it's still only 3 movies.
Yeah, the idea of canon is that if you have a franchise or a series of movies, and there's ever another one incorporated into that mythology, if it doesn't match up or it contradicts something, the creators can just, what's the word? They can, God, what is that word? It's like a retroactive, washing away.
I think I know what you mean, but...
God, that's going to drive me crazy. What? It's I don't have it. I don't...
Yeah,
they can basically ignore the existence. You look at the first few Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I think that the first 3 tell basically the same story. There's no connection between them. They both the second and third one retell the original story, and obviously the remake does. They've never been able to make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre like an ongoing series. It just they re-sculpt it, But the idea of canon itself is weird. Okay, we're playing in our sandbox, and we built this sandcastle. But this window shouldn't be here, so we'll wipe that out and cover over it, and that window was never there. That's
Yeah, exactly. And I mean with
retcon is the word I'm looking for.
Oh yeah, that's it was on the tip of my tongue too. But with the Star Wars, to some extent, like when The Force Awakens first came out, and I still think that's a decent movie, even if it does retread the first movies. There was like some question about why there's a how Finn could be a stormtrooper, because stormtroopers were supposed to be clones. They ignored that. They ignored the whole stupid ass midichlorians thing from the prequels.
Oh, that was a disaster. Space germs or something that glow. I don't.
Yeah, just like there's apparently like in the prequels, there's like something in the blood that caused the Force, or something like that, and it was like probably one of the dumber things that Lucas came up with for the prequels.
And that was on Lucas's watch. That's what gets me. This guy who uses the hero cycle of Joseph Campbell as his personal Bible for storytelling suddenly is trying to explain mythical things like the Force in the most bland scientific terms. Oh, they're space germs that glow, or so, that are luminescent, and their molecular bodies, I don't know, comprise the Force. What? It reminds me of that Robot Chicken skit where Darth Vader and Luke are in the middle of a fight, and Darth Vader tells him about midichlorians, and Luke just drops his lightsaber and says, "All right, dude, if you're not going to take this seriously, neither am I."
The thing is, like, for as much as a lot of people hate, The Last Jedi, I still think Phantom Menace is a million times worse. I've never bothered with the other two prequels because of how bad the Phantom Menace is.
It was a mistake to cast a little boy as the protagonist, I think.
Yeah, and
I get it, but
yeah, and that wasn't as big a mistake as fucking Jar Jar Binks.
Jar Jar really was cancer.
He was fucking awful, and so yeah, it's like that's the thing with like the new movies. No matter how bad they get, do they have Jar Jar Binks? No, they're better than Phantom Menace.
Yeah, who is the new Jar Jar for everyone to hate on? Is it Grace?
I know that a lot of people didn't like the Rose character.
Is it Rose that I'm thinking of? Her real name's Grace, right?
Might be the Asian woman.
That's who I'm thinking of. Yeah, she is probably the new Jar Jar. She didn't stand out to me, but she didn't grate on me either. I don't know. I don't have any problem with the last few Star Wars movies except Rogue One. So.
Yeah, I know a lot of people hated the purple-haired lady, Holdo. I can't say that she stood out enough to be hated, but she probably was the most pointless character.
Well,
like that's what I say when I say it felt like it was written by like a whole committee. Mm-hmm. It felt like they had a storyline that Leia was supposed to die in, but they didn't. They realized they can't kill Leia yet for whatever reason.
Well, now they don't have a choice.
And then they replaced her with this pointless Holdo character.
Well, now they don't have a choice, and geez, man, now all the major characters are done except Chewie, C-3PO, and R2-D2. That's it, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Has Lando showed up in the newer ones? I don't think he has he?
For some reason, I'm remembering Lando Lando dying in the original trilogy. I guess I'm wrong with that.
I don't think he did. We may be witnessing a new Mandela effect. I don't know.
No, he didn't die. He was the one who turned Solo over to the Empire, which is why he disappeared, because he was a traitor. He
almost died going into the pit of the Sarlacc pit, but he made it out. He didn't fall. At least not totally. So.
Yeah, I think because of because of how poorly Solo performed, they decided to cancel the Solo Boba Fett movie, um, or the Boba Fett movie, not the Solo Boba Fett movie.
Well, I mean, what were they going to do? Announce do a press release where Boba Fett comes out as a vegan? I mean, what does this have to do with Star Wars? It's myth. It's myth. It's world building. It's
Yeah,
it's
and
everyone, not just a section, a minority of the population that thinks they're special. It's myth for everybody. It's universal. It's another galaxy where these creatures and humanoids developed and evolved in vastly different ways from anything we're supposed to be familiar with. That's why it's set on the far side of the galaxy or universe or whatever. It's not supposed to be, like incorporating our political squabblings.
yeah, that's another thing I know that a lot of people didn't like, and I actually didn't notice this at first, but it's the case when you think about it. There's Most of the aliens in the Last Jedi were pretty much relegated to background characters. Besides Chewbacca, there really was no there's really been no like lead alien character.
Snoke's, but he's dead, right?
Yeah, and one could argue he's pretty human-ish looking, so one could argue that he was human, but
He's
you know,
bipedal, but I don't know. He looks like something I might have imagined in my closet at age 6.
yeah, he does feel like he's dollar store version of the Emperor,
He's
but
gaunt.
yeah,
Um, that the way he died, I don't even remember if we see him die. You see his body, but um, I don't know. It seemed like there was a little more to that we have yet to see. But yeah, I don't have a problem with the newer Star Wars movies, but apparently a lot of people did because didn't a bunch of fans get together on GoFundMe or Kickstarter or something and try to raise 25 million to redo The Last Jedi?
yeah, I heard about that. That's stupid. It's not gonna happen.
It's not going to happen, and I think that they would find ways to complain about that if they had actually caved in too.
Yeah, and I remember there was it was like a quote unquote fan edit that's supposed to be like, oh, the woman free version of The Last Jedi, and there was a bunch of like news outlets that were pointing and sputtering at it, and it's just like, why are you giving this fucking troll shit attention?
I
That's clearly what they wanted.
I resent George Lucas parting with his baby in order to take payday from Disney. Um,
I resent him for making the Phantom Menace.
yes,
But yeah,
yes.
it's just like it's at some point he just surrounded himself with yes men, and he just stopped. He lost whatever flame that he had. He should have just like he didn't need to make the fucking prequels. He could have easily rested on his laurels and let the expanded universe do everything from then on. It probably would have been better.
If he had not done those 3 prequels and had gone straight into The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and all that, I think that these would hold up better.
Maybe, but I'm of the opinion that they probably should have just stopped after the third one because it had a beginning, middle, and end. There's no need to go in and flog a dead pony.
That's true. I remember this. There's this quote from Neil Gaiman that's always stuck with me. When people asked him why he was wrapping up the Sandman comics, you've probably read 1 or 2 of those, right?
Yeah,
Really poetic and really profound stuff. It deals with issues across the spectrum for everyone. It's another mythological world building exercise, and people asked Neil Gaiman why he was, ending Sandman, and he said because stories that matter end.
yeah, that's my own view of it. Like when they started coming out with these like Watchmen prequel comics that apparently didn't even involve Alan Moore. My reaction was, and I love Watchmen, but my reaction to that was no, don't want it, no.
there are some things about that Watchmen series that's actually very interesting. Not the prequel, but the one that carries on. Have you heard about that one?
There's one that carries on.
Okay, somehow Ozymandias and I think Rorschach end up in the DC universe. So the Watchmen story is now involving alternate universes in the DC multiverse, right? Somehow Ozymandias finds a way and takes him and a seemingly alive, newly revived Rorschach through this, to this DC universe where Batman and all those other, characters actually exist. They have an encounter with Lex Luthor, who Ozymandias, through some complex arrangement, has determined scientifically to be the one of the smartest people in that world, along with Bruce Wayne. And Ozymandias tests Lex Luthor's metal and comes up short. I don't remember if Luthor physically disarms him or mentally disarms him, but something he does earns Ozymandias' and Rorschach's respect. Now, do you want me to tell you who is actually under the Rorschach mask in this new series?
No.
Well, it's someone from Rorschach's past. Do you care to take a guess?
The pimp that killed his mom.
The guy that killed his mom?
Yeah, I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind. It just seemed like the most ridiculous one.
Are you actually planning to read this at some point now that you know about it?
Probably not. It does sound a little better than trying to shove new stories into the Watchmen universe. It kind of sounds interesting as a one-off, but I probably won't pick it up.
Okay. Hang on. Let me find the name of this new series because it was actually placed on hold for a few months for the creators to catch up. I think it's called Doomsday Clock. And, okay, I'm just going to spoil it here for you. The guy under the Rorschach mask, who is aiding and abetting Ozymandias, who has seemingly made peace with the choices he made in order to, quote-unquote, unite the world in a peace.
Okay. Second guess, the kid who works at the newspaper that Rorschach...
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good guess, but no. But you're very close. You're hot. It is... Some people thought that, but no, it is the son of Rorschach's psychiatrist in prison. He got a hold of Rorschach's journal, I think, or his father's notes. It drove his father, to this depression that he caved to Rorschach's, worldview that things really are as bleak as he believes them to be. It's like Rorschach infected that guy's father with this belief, and he was never the same. And I think that he was actually laughed out of his professional community because he championed Rorschach's views. And so this kid took up the mantle of Rorschach. And
that's not how he turned out in the comic, though. And at the comic, at the end, he sort of has this attitude of, he seems more down, but he's sort of, the reason he's telling his wife that he has to go do his job is because of how bleak things are, so he has to keep at it.
All right, this happens later, though. This happens later after the fallout from Watchmen. But for those holding out hope that it was Walter Kovacs, no.
And he and didn't he die in the when the squid hit? The psychiatrist?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't remember. I wasn't a fan of the squid. I liked the movie ending better. It made more sense to me. I know a lot of people, the whole movie hinged on the appearance of the squid, but I thought that the new ending where they blame the energy signature of Dr. Manhattan, I thought that made more sense.
It made sense in the way they were trying to streamline the story. I think it worked better in the comic because we see all the build up to it, and there's even more of a sense of this is ridiculous, it's not going to work, but then it does.
So what's on your in your reading queue right now? I mean we're both big book lovers.
Okay. The book well, not the book I just finished. The book I just finished was a very brief introduction to Nietzsche. The book before that I read was Locus Solus by Raymond Roussel. Raymond Roussel was he was a sort of fringe French surrealist. He didn't associate directly with the actual surrealists. The actual surrealists actually didn't really like him much, but he wrote these very unusual sorts of books, and one of which was his most famous is Locus Solus. What that is Locus Solus is the name of an estate run by a doctor, and there's no real plot to the book. The quote unquote plot is him showing around the doctor showing whose name is Cantrell, I think. He's showing his friends around the estate and showing the various inventions and medical techniques that he's come up with. One of which is like the way it's described, it almost sounds like like what we would call a drone now, but he obviously they didn't have this back in early 20th century France, but it was basically a drone-like device that was used for pulling teeth. He came up with another thing in the book was the one that takes up the most time in the book is these so almost like tableau things that have corpses in them, but he discovered a technique to resurrect people. But when he resurrects them, all they're able to do is act out scenes from their life. So he's put them in these sort of tableaus, and the section is them acting out the parts of their life, like one who had murdered his adopted daughter because he was in love with her. I can't remember the rest of them off the top of my head. There's at one part he came up with a special kind of sea monkey, basically, who are luminescent. He came up with a special way of healing his cat, which involves putting him in a special tank of water that caused it to lose all its hair, but made it more healthy than it's ever been.
Wow, you had me at glow in the dark sea monkeys. I mean,
yeah, it's a very strange book, very unusual. And the funny thing is, I'm reading right now. I'm reading a very brief introduction to Foucault, and which is where like I was talking about, I was interested in his views, so I'm reading that. Foucault was also very interested in Raymond Roussel. He actually wrote a book length study of Roussel. He noted that Roussel himself was actually considered mentally ill at one point. He was diagnosed with having some sort of form of religious mania, even though he wasn't really religious, and he died in a very mysterious way. He was the sort who would always almost always keep his door unlocked and open, but he was actually found dead with his door closed and locked. So nobody really knows what happened to him, why he died. So yeah, Roussel was a very unusual character, and this book, Locus Solus, I wouldn't say I gloss over it. It's just that reading it is such a barrage of strange and unusual images that trying to retain it is very difficult. I definitely have to pick it up again at some point and reread it in sections and a lot more slowly to try to grasp everything that's in it.
Mm-hmm. I've read a lot of books. Like you say, Solus Locus or Locus Solus?
Locus Solus.
Okay. Yeah, I can think of 3 books off the top of my head who have that same thing. It's just such it's such an overwhelming surge of weirdness that It's almost not quantifiable, right? Like, let's see, Bleak Warrior by Alistair Rennie. That one reminds me of that. Also, Lesa Bendio, which we talked about on a previous show. That one was by Paul Shearbart. And one that I finished up recently called The Troika, which I'm pretty sure is going on close to number one on my year-end list. Man, this thing blew me away. It won the Philip K. Dick Award in '99, and I mean, it's just incredible. Picture this, if you will: a Brontosaurus, a talking jeep, and a woman, a human woman, walking through an endless desert for hundreds of years, and there are three purple suns shining over them. And that is just how you get your feet wet in reading the Troika. It goes off into all these different possibilities of what could be going on that you're never really quite sure what's going on. I mean, it just blew me away. It was exhausting, the amount of imagination on Stepan Chapman's canvas here that he's working with. I mean, you don't know if there's some sort of past life regression, if it's, alternate universes being played with, if it's time travel or some converging of time travelers. You don't know if it's the afterlife and they're atoning for some sin in purgatory. It's just incredible. And I was going to book this guy on the show only to find out that he died a long time ago, actually. I was very disappointed to hear that, because I just had to try to pick this guy's brain that wrote this. And yeah, I can totally see the Philip K. Dick in this. He won the award for the Troika. I mean, wow. What else can you say, dude? I was exhausted by the end of reading this. I don't know what else to say about it. There are even different speculations for what the desert they're traveling through could be, to the point that I just threw up my arms at one point and just rode with it,
That was somewhat the same with Locus Solus. It seems rather straightforward, but it was really hard to absorb in the way that I read it. It's definitely had something I would have to get again and just read a lot more slowly than I did before. I kind of had to push through it because I got it through interlibrary loan. So I had a limited time to read it.
That's my problem. I'll do those sometimes. I forget the name of the website, but yeah, I'll occasionally check them out online, and I can never finish them in time, because I'm always, and this is not an exaggeration, I'm always reading 50 books at once or more. I maybe I have some sort of reading ADD, but I have to flit from one book to another in several afternoons. I just cannot focus on one unless I am really engrossed. I cannot do it. I have to constantly be, just juxtaposing a bizarro novel with alternate history, conspiracy theory, straightforward politics, religious, debate, just everything. I can't do one thing at a time when it comes to reading.
Yeah, I'm the exact opposite. I pretty much need to focus on one book, especially if it's a book that I'm reading to write a review for.
Yeah, you are quite the reviewer, right?
Yeah, so I read a lot of books for review, and then I try to flip between I'll read one book to review and then write the review and then start on a book for pleasure and then just go in that pattern.
Mm-hmm. What about that book on Arthur Shawcross, the serial killer that you read recently?
Yeah, the Shawcross letters. I actually because I had seen the documentary Interview with a Serial Killer, which is it seems to be a fairly popular Netflix documentary about Shawcross himself and the and his crimes and things like that. So I kind of figured it would be along that vein, but it's a lot different. It's a lot more about the author John Paul Fay than it is about the Shawcross letters and his relationship with Shawcross. Um, the Because the letters themselves, from Arthur Shawcross, he just comes across like a fucking idiot in them. Uh, he has terrible grammar, terrible spelling. He's constantly making these like really awful and stupid sex jokes. But John Paul Fay, since he was like a quote unquote murderabilia dealer, he would sell like paintings by serial killers and things like that. He developed like a business relationship with Shawcross to sell Shawcross's paintings on eBay, and he eventually started developing a sort of like friendship with him. Even at one point in the book, he states that he almost felt like Shawcross was a surrogate father to him. The which in Like I said, reading the letters, you kind of wonder what he sees in Shawcross, but we do kind of see John Paul Fay's background in the book. He talks about how he came from uh, an abusive household. He had like lifelong problems with alcoholism. He had trouble holding down jobs. He had very, very troubled relationships with women. He had been arrested for assault a couple times, mostly from being drunk. So you can kind of see like uh, how this man John Paul Fay could develop a sort of connection to Arthur Shawcross. The writing in it almost kind of reminds me of a little bit of a of Peter Sotos, though more focused on like a serial killer rather than on sex crimes in the media and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just very like a stream of consciousness, and very much concerned with trying to understand his own psychological connection with the atrocities of Arthur Shawcross. But basically, like the sort of conclusion of the book, which is it feels like a bit of an anticlimax, but it seems appropriate the way the book was written. Is Shawcross had like written his biography, and John Paul Fay was sort of supposed to be the go-between to get it published, but the agent that he found and the publisher that he found, they didn't want to do anything until they actually read the manuscript. But Arthur Shawcross, because he's paranoid that they were going to steal it without giving him anything, refused to release anything, and basically wanted a contract to release it before he would give it to them. So, and after that, that dust up, their relationships has kind of petered out.
Have you ever noticed when he does interviews, Shawcross has this twitch every few seconds that is very uncommon. You can tell that there's something like a light flickering upstairs.
Yeah, there's definitely that. Like I said, in the interview with the serial killer and in the letters, he comes across very different. Because in the interviews, he comes across as a complete psychopath, and he'd be someone you know if something is wrong with him if even if you didn't know he was a serial killer. And in the letters, he just comes across as someone's stupid uncle who likes to make dumb pussy jokes.
Have you? Does the book touch at all on? I heard this anecdote once about how Shawcross came home from the war, and I don't remember which war it was. Do you?
I don't. Given his age, I'd probably say Vietnam.
Yeah. He came home from the war to find out that he had married before shipping out, and he was unconvinced by the woman's claims. Is this brought up at all in this book?
It doesn't get brought up, but he does bring up his wife, and he like constantly complains in the letters that she's not visiting him and things like that.
I think that the person who brought this up was trying to tie it into one of those occult theories of serial killers working in tandem with some shadowy society and everything. And they were suggesting that this woman that he married before shipping out, and he had no recollection of marrying her when he came back, that she was a witch, and she had gotten him into some sort of hex that he had no, consent in being a part of. I think that was the charge. And of course, you wouldn't expect that, in just any book about this guy. You said that the author almost made it about him at times.
Well, I would say it actually is about him. It's more about his relationship with Arthur Shawcross than it is about Shawcross himself.
See, I have a problem with that. I had that same problem when I read this book about. You've heard about the Maura Murray disappearance, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't think it's a bad book at all. I definitely think it's interesting. It's an interesting insight into, why we have a fascination with serial killers. And, like I said, because of Shawcross's letters themselves, you sort of get the impression that Shawcross himself isn't much to speak about.
Mm-hmm. I had that same problem, though, with True Crime Addict, How I Lost Myself in the Mysterious Disappearance of Maura Murray by James Renner. Now, from that title, you could gather that the book is probably a great deal about James Renner. However, considering that there has not been another, quality, like professionally done book written about Maura Murray's case as of yet, one would hope that he would kind of helped usher that in. Instead, I'm treated to entire chapters about his mouth getting him into trouble with contempt of court, about his son being put on psych meds, and all this other extraneous shit that has nothing to do with Maura Murray, but about his fragile psyche. And that was very disappointing. Even from the title, you could have judged that. Sometimes you can judge a book by its title. They say you can't judge a book by its cover. You can judge it by its title sometimes, unfortunately. And, and another book that I had a problem with was Caracalla, a military biography, where it is the only book, professionally done about that particular Roman emperor at this point. And I should have taken the subtitle A Military Biography to heart, because it's more about strategies that were used during his time, in that donning the purple cloak and all that, and strategies and military maneuvers and everything and all this. It really was literally a military biography. But considering that these are the only books about both Caracalla and Maura Murray at this point, I was very disappointed that those titles lived up to their, titles. But I hate that when the author puts themselves front and center, makes themselves self-important, in the eye of their relationship interviewing a serial killer, because we're buying it to hear about the serial killer, right?
Right. Maybe it's because I hadn't read a book like that before, so to me it did seem like a sort of fresh take on the true crime genre. Because it definitely, like, prose-wise, it is pretty well written. There's some cases where it's a little too overwrought, or something that he thinks is clever, it's just kind of dumb. But for the most part, I did find myself, finding it to be an interesting and insightful book.
Cool. Any other books that have been in the queue lately?
There's one I read that I really enjoyed. It's called Young Hearts Crying by Richard Yates. Have you read any of his work?
No. Yates or Gates?
Yates.
Yates?
Tes.
Young Heart Rising, or Young Hearts Rising?
Young Hearts Crying.
Crying. Okay.
What it's about, I definitely recommend Revolutionary Road. That's a really great book.
Wait, Richard Yates. Richard Yates, that was the title of a Tao Lin novel, wasn't it? Or book?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he named it after
this guy.
The author. But what it's about these two it's a sort of life of these two people from when they were in college, from when they meet in college up until uh, they're older. It's a guy named Michael Davenport and his wife Lucy. Both of them are, well, they're uh, honestly, they're both kind of pretentious. Michael is also kind of an idiot. He wants to be like a poet and a playwright, but he does a lot of uh, dumb, impulsive things. One of the things he does like twice is while he's at a party, he gets annoyed by someone, so he offers to do what's called trading punches, where they take turns punching each other in the stomach. The thing is, like, he used to be a boxer, so he knows how to tense his stomach muscles, so it doesn't really hurt. Well, the other person doesn't, so he just lays them out flat, which of course gets him in trouble with everyone. Um, and the it starts like right after World War II. Follows Michael and Lucy when they meet in college and get married. And one thing that Michael didn't know when he met Lucy is that she came from a very wealthy family and had like a ton of money to her own name, but he refuses to let her use that money for anything but herself because he's very prideful and wants to be the breadwinner. And another big part of the book is that both of them have deep desires to be around successful artists. So when at one point, they meet a guy who is a successful artist who has like galleries in New York City and so forth. They sort of find ways to be able to hang around them. They, Michael, throughout the time he's married to Lucy, he develops all these like crushes on on women who are more accomplished artists, and at sort of the 1/3 point of the book, both of them have a complete falling out with each other, and they get divorced. The second part of the book follows Lucy more closely, as she's a single mother. And like one of the first things we learn is like shortly after Michael gets divorced from her, he had a nervous breakdown and had to be committed to Bellevue. And the thing with like Lucy is she's very focused on trying to find some sort of creative endeavor that she can attach herself to. She, paints, she writes, does acting, things like that, but she gets discouraged very easily. Like there's one point where she gets to have a leading role in A Streetcar Named Desire, and she gets reasonably good feedback, but she still ends up giving up because another actress in the play gets more praise than she does. There's another part where she starts taking classes for writing short stories, and again she gets discouraged with that very easily because she gets involved with the teacher of the class, who ends up being kind of a douche and sort of just ends up like throwing her out. There's and then when she tries to paint, like she and this takes place over like the course of several years. She spends like 3 years trying to learn how to paint, and when she actually gets some paintings together and she goes to one of the painter friends to ask for feedback, he just looks them over and says they're okay. And after that, she's like completely discouraged in trying to pursue that. And then the third part of the book follows Michael in his post-divorce life. It's him, meeting other women. Like there's one particularly funny part where he meets this one woman who's actually engaged and starts an affair with her, but like the entire time he's with her, he can't get an erection. So the whole thing is just like a very cringeworthy humiliation conga basically for him.
Probably from all those
And
punches.
no, it's just sort of it's a sort of psychological thing with a feeling of being powerless, basically. Uh, there's another point where he meets because Lucy and Michael have a daughter. He meets his daughter's guidance counselor and falls in love with her and gets married with her. The sort of climax of the book, with at least with Michael's part, is where his daughter becomes a hippie. Like I said, this goes up to like the late to mid '60s. He She goes on like a road trip with a bunch of her friends from college and goes out to uh, San Francisco, I think it is.
Mm.
And he actually gets a call from her that she's had sort of a psychotic breakdown from taking too many hallucinogenics. And then he has to go out to San Francisco and retrieve her and get her help. Um, the it's a very interesting view because there is a sort of sense of Richard Yates himself being someone who's unfamiliar with this sort of with the hippies and this revolution, but it's not treated in like uh, a moralizing way, just a way of like someone who's getting older and not really understanding what's happening around him, how radically things are changing. And the book, it does kind of end on a semi-happy note. We find out that Lucy, what she's gotten involved with is she's given like away most of her independent wealth to philanthropy, and she's found herself very happy with that. And Michael, for a while, he was worried that his new wife would divorce him because he's seen a bunch of the feminist revolution stuff. So he's worried that she's going to attach herself to that and leave him. But he sort
It's a
of comes to
legitimate concern.
realization.
It's a legitimate concern. Go ahead.
Somewhat, but you get the sense that if she leaves him, it would be more because of his own problems and not because of any sort of feminist revolution. But
is he still impotent by this point?
Huh?
Is he still impotent?
Is he still what?
Impotent at this point?
No, that only happens with one woman. Like right one. After that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's after the woman he's impotent with that he meets his second wife, who he gets married to and has no problem getting it up, and even has another kid with her. And the book ends on him sort of realizing that even if she does leave him, he's done plenty of good. That he's had he wasn't like a big successful poet, but he did get a couple books published, which is more than a lot of people do. So he sort of comes to the conclusion that even if she does leave him, it's it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. This one's on the longer side, isn't it?
A little bit. It's something. It was. I've got it. It's like something like 400 pages, but it doesn't feel long. There were times where I was almost like surprised with how much time has passed, but that's because I found myself like so absorbed in these people and their lives that it was hard to realize that how fast their lives are going by in this book.
You know what? It sounds episodic. I'm surprised it hasn't been optioned for like an FX TV series or something. By the sound of it.
It would definitely make a good TV series. I know they made a movie of Revolutionary Road. I haven't seen that movie, but Revolutionary Road has more of a like straightforward, more of a shorter, self-contained plot, and it is a similar sort of I guess suburban drama kind of thing.
That's Richard Yates too.
Yeah.
Okay. What books? Are there any books that you have kind of obsessed over, but that they're seemingly unattainable at this point for one reason or another, due to price or rarity? Just are there any books that would, like, if you could possess it, even for a time, it would fill a void in you.
The first one that comes to mind in that is Pierre Guyat's Eden, Eden, Eden. Because I've read his book, Tomb for 50,000 Soldiers, which is also out of print and very expensive. But the thing with like Eden, 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 and Tomb for 50,000 Soldiers is that they were both published through Creation Books, the English translations. And as far as I can tell, there's been no other attempts to translate them. And I don't know if you know what happened with Creation Books, but it was kind of a shame.
A shame for them, or a shame for someone else?
Well, for pretty much everyone except the guy who owns Creation Books, because it turns out they were having problems where they were not paying their authors. They were selling rights to translations of authors without without the author's consent. They weren't paying them the royalties that they were owed, and they had some pretty. They had they had books from Peter Sotos. They had books from Boyd Rice. They were the ones who first published Matthew Stoker's Cows. So because of all these problems with it, Creation Books went out of business, and all these books went out of print, including like the translations they did of things like Pierre Guyat.
Mm-hmm. You're familiar with this janitor whose work was discovered posthumously, named Henry Darger?
Yes.
Real introverted guy. No one knew that he had amassed these 50,000 words of an ongoing manuscript with elaborate drawings and art melded into the book. I don't even know if he ever intended to publish this, but it was called The Story of the Vivian Girls, and an account of the Glendalian and Angelico War, something like that. And it's basically, I don't know, my first impressions from the art he did for it, Cupids and Cherubs at War, I don't know. He had this obsession with characters that were little girls of both genders, right?
Yeah.
And he had always wanted his own daughter, and he had tried several times to adopt through the years, and it never worked out, right?
Right.
Why can't we get a hold of this manuscript, released in a series or as one giant tome? Why can't it happen?
Yeah, I understand it's been published in excerpts, but apparently it's never been published in full. I'm guessing it would be prohibitively expensive to do that. But I guess they could try to publish it without even without the illustrations. It's still something like 1,500 pages.
They could break it up into volumes like every author at Tor Fantasy does.
Yeah.
I really feel like someday that's going to get released. I just don't know if it'll be in my lifetime. Somebody ought to be working on that,
Yeah. Actually, there's a really good sort of mini documentary about him on a YouTube channel called Down the Rabbit Hole. Really? I don't know if you've seen that.
I may have. I saw something on him, and they focused on his, how he had always wanted a daughter and how he could never make it happen, even trying to adopt. He was turned down several times. And I think he just strikes me as a very lonely character. And why he didn't want to share his gift with the world, I'll never understand. He was like Emily Dickinson. Her poems were discovered posthumously in a chest at the foot of her bed, right? She didn't want to share her poetry with anyone. Franz Kafka asked his closest friend Max Brod that he retrieve all his writings upon his death and burn them. And boy, good thing he didn't listen, right?
Right.
Why
Yeah,
do these people want to hide their work from the world? Now, the one exception would be J.D. Salinger, because I can kind of admire his ability to, you know, squander all his work, you know, and keep it from hidden from the public eye. Because he said once, there's I write for myself and no one else. There's a certain joy in writing for yourself and never sharing it with anyone. Um, and how he wrote every day, but for his own enjoyment. And I mean, why did he even publish Catcher in the Rye if he felt this way? He must have had a really, you know, shitty experience with the publishing racket to feel this strongly about it, right?
it must be. I remember hearing that apparently when Darger was in the hospital and basically close to his death, that his landlord and some of his neighbors had discovered his writing and his art, and they were very fascinated by it. And when they told him, he was apparently very surprised they had any interest in it, and just sort of shrugged off and said, "Oh, too late now."
Oh, come on. There was another. I actually heard there was another sprawling, epic 1,500-page book that he was writing, and I don't think he ever finished it. But it was his memoirs, and for hundreds of pages, according to this one documentary I saw, it for hundreds of pages it deviated off into this exploration of tornadoes and following the trail of a whirlwind that can't be, you know, extinguished. And man, I love things like that break away from convention and like create these whole new, you know, rules in literature. Not so much the wise asses that like to just put one word on a page with no punctuation. I don't like those wise asses, but that kind of stuff where you turn your memoirs into 100-page excursion into the trail of a tornado. That stuff I can admire. That's cool shit. You know?
Yeah.
Editors will try to destroy work like that and revise it. You know they will.
Yeah, there's they want something that would be considered, sellable, and it's pretty obvious that Henry Darger's work was, not exactly commercially viable for many reasons, but there was still a sort of like sense that you're glad that someone who just worked without even considering that in the least and just let it all sort of come out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a sort of sense of admiration in that.
What's the most you would pay if this thing became available, but it was a little bit on the pricey side? What is the maximum amount you'd be willing to pay to read this without knowing the quality?
I don't know how much usually books around like that. If it was expensive enough, I'd just do the whole interlibrary loan thing and just renew and pay fees if I have to.
I think to own it, I would pay $50 and no more. I think it's worth that for its length, but I wouldn't pay any more than that.
Yeah, it would probably definitely be expensive to print with the art in full color.
It would have to include all that. I wouldn't want anything excluded. You know that there are J.D. Salinger stories in a library in New Hampshire, I think, that you can read, but they're behind a locked door. They'll give you the key, and there will be a guard posted to watch you while you read. And these are specifically for J.D. Salinger stories that were never published, like The Ocean Full of Bowling Balls, The Last and the Best of the Peter Pans, and I think The Magic Foxhole, maybe. And you can only read them under observation by this guard behind an unlocked door.
Huh.
Crazy, huh? Why?
Yeah, I'm guessing they don't want people taking pictures of it and trying to spread them around.
But why? The guy's dead.
It's probably
His
something
estate.
to do with what he requested in his in his estate.
I
I guess
think
because they know how valuable they would be if they got out. They're very careful with them.
I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that in his will he directed that unpublished works remain unpublished for 50 years following his death. That was like a big fuck you to readers who admired him. Why though? I just don't get it, man. I understand, being sensitive to public scrutiny or not, finding the literary press phony or any number of things, but to squander that to such an extreme like that, uh, you know what? Something else. Harlan Ellison, God rest his soul, died recently. Um, who's one of the big reasons that I scream into a microphone today. He just like Kafka directed his wife that upon his death for her to burn all his remaining unpublished work. I hope that she doesn't listen, but I have a feeling she will.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was one book that Harlan Ellison had published. I can't remember what it was called, but basically, like, if you presented it to him to be signed, he would ask to buy the book off of you and then destroy it because he hated it that much.
If he disliked the book?
It was a book he had published, and he like if anyone brought it to him to be signed, he would ask to buy it from them, and then would just destroy it in front of everyone because he hated the book that much.
But you don't know what it was.
It was a book that was published with like Ace or something like that.
Was it The Star Lost?
No. Let me see if I can find it here.
Mephisto and Onyx?
Trying to find it here. It's
Spider Kiss?
No, that's actually his only full-length novel, I think, but I think he's pretty proud of that one.
The Man with Nine Lives?
No, it was the only thing I can remember off the top of my head is that it was an Ace double book, and I guess the editors messed with it a lot, which is why he hated it so much, and it was sort of outside of his contractual ability to stop it from getting out. So, like, if anyone presented it to him to sign, he would buy it off of them and then just destroy it.
Well, looking around here, I see an Ace double here called The Man with Nine Lives and A Touch of Infinity. That's a double. I'll bet that's it. It was one of his first, so.
I don't think it's that. I thought it would be easier to find it, but I'm still looking here.
My favorite Harlan Ellison collection was Strange Wine. That blew me away. Just every story, just perfect.
Yeah, that was the first book of his I read back in high school, and yeah, I really
A to Z and the Chocolate Alphabet. That was a good one, where he just conjured these images for every letter of the alphabet that, and they were brief. They were almost flash fiction, each entry, and that just set my imagination on fire when I too read that in high school. So.
Yeah, the first story, Croatoa, that really blew me away when I first read it. Because, like, when you think about it in, like, the hands of, like, any other author, it would just be a disgusting, gross-out story, but Harlan Ellison made it a very touching story about learning responsibility.
Was it about the miscarriage that she flushed or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And the book that he wanted to destroy was called Doomsman.
I've never heard of that. That's a novel or what? A novella?
Yeah, it was like a novella, and he hated it so much what was done with it that he like whenever anyone would present it to him to sign at like a signing, he would pay them uh, he would pay them to buy it and would just destroy it in front of everyone.
He really came alive at that signing I went to. I bought Spider Kiss in line at Dragon Con one year, and he was the star attraction for me. I'd watched him rant and rave on Sci-Fi Buzz for years, and I didn't always understand what he was talking about, but his presence was electrifying, and it kind of made me want to be opinionated like that, you know. Which is why it shocks me so much that I became docile for years to accommodate small press peers when I teethed basically on Harlan Ellison rants of the rawest form.
Yeah, his rants are always entertaining. I don't know if you've ever read his essay Xenogenesis.
No. Wait. Xenogenesis was also an Octavia Butler novel, and he was friends with her. So
yeah,
okay.
Xenogenesis is it's an essay about the problems within the science fiction community. It was things like how he would have people calling the FBI on him, basically, claiming that he had like guns and stuff in order to mess with him. And that was basically like swatting.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so
SWAT teams even existed.
Yeah, so people complaining about I got doxxed, I got swatted, and all it was just another day to him, huh?
Yeah, and how the hate letters he would get, and he also talked about things that happened at conventions, like I think it was Alan Dean Foster, like how at one time someone came up to him, asked if he was Alan Dean Foster, and then threw a cup of warm vomit in his face.
Wait, Harlan threw a cup of warm vomit in Alan Dean Foster's face?
No, this was what Harlan Ellison was talking about, like an incident that happened to Alan Dean Foster at a convention. Like some fan who apparently had some sort of problem with him, apparently decided to puke in a cup, find Alan Dean Foster, and throw the vomit in his face. and he never found out why.
Wow. I would demand to know. I would want to interrogate that guy myself.
And yeah, he was giving these examples as like problems of what was going on at science fiction conventions and in the science fiction community.
Well, let's not leave old Harlan out. Where he mailed a dead gopher to one of his publishers.
Right. So that for him, in his mind at least, he was doing this because they. Yeah, I think I remember the reason why they did that, because they put cigarette ads in his book, and he said, like, I don't want this, I don't support smoking, and they just sort of just jerked him around and kept them in there. So finally, he just decided to nail the fucking dead gopher to the publisher, and that got them to take it out.
Wow. Of course, it's always a noble thing when one mails a dead gopher to their enemies, so... especially ones that employ them or their talents to some degree,
I'm sure you wanted to send a dead gopher to your boss at some point.
Yeah. She'd probably photograph it and put it on Facebook, but I remember one of his rants was legendary. It was about no, wait. It wasn't Harlan Ellison, but talking about someone who was so passionate about a book that they wanted to destroy it, that put me in mind of Spider Robinson in his scathing review of The Stand, and how he would go up to people, complete strangers, and beg them to not read The Stand if he saw them with it. Because he according to him, it was so poorly written. And the problem with The Stand has been addressed, I believe, with the final cut that was republished later on. Stephen King took so long to write it that brands of cigarettes and candy bars were no longer around, and so he had this gap of time that he said this was taking place in, and yet things that no longer existed were happening at this particular year, and this was, an outdated technology or something, and yet there it was. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's sort of like when people have things happen in the distant future and the Soviet Union is still around.
Yeah. So he was historically speaking, there were parts of the Stand that were an eyesore. I don't know if that had anything to do with Spider Robinson's dislike of that book, but what you told me about Harlan wanting to destroy a book, that reminded me of that. Geez, we've been going after this for 2 hours, and we have barely talked about politics. Not that I have a problem with that. You got a little bit. You got a little bit longer to go, don't you?
Yeah, I can go a little longer.
Okay. Some other books that I have coveted in recent months: The Platypus of Doom and Other Nihilists. I don't remember the author. And also Time Snake and Super Clown. You go on Amazon and that thing, the cheapest it is $40. And I have no idea why these have yet to be reprinted, because they've had articles written about them by sci-fi review sites and everything. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I actually saw the one article that you shared about it, and it definitely sounds really interesting.
Apparently this guy, for Time Snake and Super Clown, this guy has sex with this woman who reveals herself to be some, I don't know, cosmic clown and everything. And he's so unsatisfying in the sack that she punishes him by turning him into a clown or something, with a honking nose and everything. And he doesn't realize for 20 pages that he's not wearing pants. He said, "Man, I must have been really bad if to not notice that I wasn't wearing pants for this long." That's what is hinted at in the book review I read of it, and then he's urged by some other cosmic watcher from outside time that the Time Snake is coming, and he's going to devour the earth and everything, and he has to get ready for it. And so the whole novel, he's preparing for this showdown, only to find out that the Time Snake is actually a good guy and wants to make universal peace or some shit. I'm just going on, the descriptions from this review, but it sounds like a real trip, and I fear I will never read it. Anyone has any leads out there, please let me know. Email me at sickfix with 2 X's at gmail.com, or get in touch with me on Goodreads. I use that more than Facebook. I would love to get a hold of those, or the Vivian Girls, or the Platypus of Doom. These are books that I'm very interested in owning. They've been built up and hyped up so much to me that they're now mythical to me. So,
yeah, one that it's available in its original language, but not in English. It's Kyoko's House by Yukio Mishima. I don't know if you've seen the movie Mishima: A Life in 4 Chapters.
No.
But one of the stories that gets adapted there is Kyoko's House, and the idea behind it is it's a sort of cast of characters to sort of represent the different facets of Mishima. Like there's a boxer, a painter, an actor, a businessman, who represent the different parts of his personality, and it's it's their individual stories. Like in Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, it mostly tells the actor's story, and it's about him developing a sadomasochistic relationship with this woman who's like a higher up in the Yakuza, and eventually commits a sort of erotic suicide with her. But
now this is the guy that wrote Runaway Horses, Confessions of a Mask, and Sun and Steel, right?
Yeah, okay. And the reason they used Kyoko's House as one of the stories is they originally wanted to use the book Forbidden Colors, which is available in English, but Forbidden Colors is basically about Yukio Mishima's homosexuality, and his widow, since he did marry a woman, denied them the permission to use that, so they used Kyoko's House instead. But Kyoko's House has never been translated into English, so I Would really like to see that translated.
Mm-hmm. You said he
Tempted
did
to
not
learn Japanese just so I can read it.
right. He did not marry a woman. Is that what you said?
No, he did marry a woman.
Oh, okay.
And
But
his widow is very sensitive about the topic of his homosexuality.
is she still alive?
Yeah, she is. I don't know if she is now, but she was for when Yu-Gi-Oh! When a Life in Four Chapters was made.
This is going to be a bit of a curveball, but have you ever watched a horror movie and up to the ending and thought about what happens after the credits?
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it might be a little autistic or whatever, but I do quite a bit. I mean, what happens in horror movies or action movies or any movie where the character's arc is, takes dominance over recognized authority like policemen, military, and all this. Their arc of redemption or whatever they're chasing, it takes precedence over all recognized authority, right? So, what are some things that happen in those with those parameters?
Right. Let's see what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, the policemen will try to arrest them, and they'll break all these laws trying to get away to obstruct justice or perceived justice. They'll fib to someone under interrogation. They will flip off a cop or assault them in order to get away or to stop something from happening that only they understand. They'll interfere with military operations. They will confiscate cars to get somewhere faster. They will, restrain someone against their will in order to keep them from hurting themselves or someone else. All these laws of the social contract, basically are impeded upon in fiction, in books and horror movies and whatnot. What if one were to write like a little follow-up novella or something, or do a short, film about the fallout from all the shit that they rack up in, charges, like legal shit, afterwards that they have to deal with. So they've slain the monster, but you wrecked 3 cars, trying to get away from it, pal. Do you really think that with the way courts are today, and yeah, this is dwelling in the imagination quite a bit, but do you really think they would be totally respectful, that they wouldn't at least get fines or community service for these things at best? It's
yeah, that's definitely funny to consider. There are definitely like certain films, like when the credits you're thinking, oh, that was a happy ending, except as soon as everything settles down, this person is fucked.
Right.
I'm trying to think of like a specific example, but nothing's coming to mind.
Well, something else. I've
definitely seen films like that where it's just like, that's a happy ending. It's just like, okay, maybe it is now, but as soon as by tomorrow, shit is going to go wrong again.
Boy, yeah, they're gonna wish they were still fighting the monster, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I think about this a lot. It kind of interferes with my enjoyment of film now. Not as much with fiction literature, but I guess that's the appeal, that the monster kind of, intercepts the established order. And so you have to kind of break convention to to combat the monster. But like for instance, though, these like a group of kids, 20-something kids, will go camping, and they're picked off one by one throughout the night, and they all have these lives. Maybe one's pregnant, and another one's about to, propose to his girl. Another one's going off to college, next fall. And they get picked off one by one, and their parents may try to call them on their cell phone to check in, and they haven't heard from them, all kinds of stuff. They're going to be badgering that surviving final girl or whatever pretty hard in the aftermath, like questioning, like, what did you do? Why did you let my son die? It's silly to think about too long, but I kind of enjoy thinking about just how much, time those people are going to be spending in court after the credits.
Yeah, it reminds me of. I remember this one reviewer talking about one of the Halloween sequels, and what they were speculating was the idea of the doctor, Michael Myers' daughter or doctor. What's his name again?
I don't have it. Doctor. I'll think of it later.
Yeah, well, they sort of speculated that a good idea for one of
Loomis.
Loomis, yeah. They speculated that a good idea for a sequel rather than the sequel that they had actually gotten was a story about how Loomis sort of becomes a media horror around the Michael Myers' story. It sort of becomes a sort of betrays like the the intent that he had in the previous ones to sort of just sell this story and sell a memoir about working with Michael Myers.
That would be interesting. You could invent entire stories just based around the most remote parts of these big stories like that. Like for instance, I remember hearing in the original series from Loomis at one point, he says that Michael Myers spent spent several years just staring at a wall. Well, what was he seeing? Was he seeing the wall? I have a feeling he was seeing something else. But what? You could write an entire fiction story about that. I don't know if it'd be count as fan fiction or if you could get by literizing it, but that would be interesting to explore. Like, is he inventing a whole world in his head? What?
Yeah, it sort of makes me think of that that one. It was one of the Living Dead movies where the scientist is talking about the zombies staring at a wall, not seeing the wall, looking past the wall.
Mm-hmm. Oh, something else. Return of the Living Dead. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
The original. In the beginning, when the guy's with his uncle at that, is it a morgue or a crematorium? Something?
Yeah.
Something like that. They're looking at the skeletons that go to medical use. They're donated to libraries or museums or classrooms to study.
Mm-hmm.
The skeletons are from India and they have perfect teeth. You could write an entire story about what's going on there. Is it a body farm? Like, are they like skeleton harvesting? What? I mean,
I remember. I think I remember that. That didn't really stick with me for some reason. Like that they have perfect teeth. It does remind me of something I've read recently. In order to tell the difference between rocks and bones, archaeologists will sometimes put the thing that they find on their tongue, and if it sticks, it's a bone.
Huh. Jesus, I lost my train of thought. What we were talking about though, what I believe is that Waxwork 2 is actually the perfect sequel. That's what this whole thing was leading to, this whole argument. Because have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen any of the Waxwork movies.
None of them? Okay.
No.
Well, basically, it's the typical wax museum comes to life. It's like people who interfere with the wax museum exhibits. They will enter a portal and be taken into that scene, basically. And often they end up dead, This guy's whole cast, a crew of friends, disappear and die being transported through these exhibits. In the second movie, it opens at the closing of the first waxwork, and the woman comes, the love interest, she comes home to find her stepmother murdered by this severed hand that I think showed up in the first movie. I can't remember. But there's probably a nod to Peter Raimi or Sam Raimi of Evil Dead 2. But so she is put on trial and arrested for the murder of her stepfather throughout the whole movie. And then by the end, they have captured the hand, and it's sitting there, tapping its finger on the glass case, waiting for a decision to be rendered. But they prove her innocence by virtue of this hand in a glass case. To me, though, as silly as it is, it's the idea of a perfect sequel, not in terms of fan satisfaction or fan service, but in terms of just following something to its utmost, boundary.
The logical progression.
Yeah. Now, not just anybody could pull that off. But I think that more people should try to tell a story like that, at least in the movie world. By the way, have you seen that new Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom?
No, I haven't.
I've seen it
reason,
twice.
I just never got into the Jurassic Park thing.
Really? I've seen it twice. Let me tell you, the antagonists, the villains in that movie are very well done. I wanted so badly for them to die so painfully by the end. That's the sign of a good villain, and they both outdid themselves in one scene or another. And it was a fun ride to watch an entire ecosystem on that island collapse due to the volcano. And man, there are some scenes where you sympathize with these anthropomorphic, dinosaurs. But I think it's a well done sequel. I just had to throw that out there. Do we have time to talk about world building? How much time you got left? Would you say?
I got plenty of time. I don't really have any plans tonight. So
okay, I wouldn't expect to go for another hour, but I did want to talk about world building. What when you think of world building in storytelling, what comes to mind to you as the best?
As the best, hard for me to say what the best is. I don't know if I'd call it the best, since it does sort of fall apart at the end, but the one I found most memorable was the Dark Tower series.
That's a good one, yeah. What are some examples of that world building to you that meant the most to you?
There was a sense of it to a world that was different and yet had enough similarities that it felt relatively real. There was also a good consistent sense of that it used to be like a much more successful world, but that it had decayed away for some reason.
It was kind of this intersection of sword and sorcery fantasy, but updated enough to complement the whole Western aesthetic that he was going for with Roland Deschain.
Yeah, exactly. It felt like it combined like Western science fiction and fantasy in a very like neat and clean way. It didn't feel like he was going out of his way to mash those things up. It just sort of naturally came together that way.
Yeah. And you had different creatures that inhabited this world, like Billy Bumblers, one of whom joins their little band of heroes. And then there were the giant crab things that just went around saying "Dudachuk, Dudachoy," and they were viciously like poison and violent. What were they called?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read it.
Right, and then in either Wolves of the Kala or Song of Susanna, there was this virtual reality area that I think it was called Blue Heaven or something, where you could simulate a sexual experience with anyone in whatever kink you had, but the catch is that you had to use the mental energy of these kids who had telepathic abilities, right? And they would eventually end up brain dead. Is that correct?
I think so. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've read it.
And they would also offer some of these kids up as sacrifices to the wolves of the Kala, who wore like Doctor Doom ensembles, the green cloaks, and they had wolf-like faces. And I remember Roland dispatched them quite well and rendered a judgment in favor of the neglected kids who who had been nearly destroyed by these selfish people, and he decided that they would go into basically abject servitude, and whatever kindness they could expect would come from these children who they would now serve. Basically, he judged that they would enter into a period of slavery under these kids and the impoverished that suffered at their hands. And I mean, he was a boss about rendering that judgment, whether he had the authority or not. Yeah, we get way into our fiction, don't we?
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't even have a problem with Stephen King writing himself into the story. I thought that the way he did it, it worked seamlessly, even with the 3 different versions of Stephen King that stood in Roland's way at the bridge near the end.
Yeah.
And
I did have like problems with it towards the end, like how it felt like he was rushing to wrap everything up.
I definitely think that. And I think it was kind of weak, the out he gave himself to say, you should stop reading right now because stories don't always end how we want them to.
Yeah, he should have either just left it ambiguous or left out that disclaimer because, if you're not confident in the ending, don't put it out or don't draw attention to it.
King has never been good at ending stories. It is a fact.
Yeah, he does often come up with disappointing resolutions.
I can think of one Stephen King story ever that had a satisfactory ending that was complete and well, it was well anchored to the plot and not meandering a little bit, and that was The Dead Zone. That's still one of my favorites of his.
Yeah, still need to read that one.
I like the integrated Castle Rock mythology too. What little I've read of it, I think he said Needful Things was his last Castle Rock book. I don't know why. But yeah, I do like that he expanded his works into a whole multiverse. So like it all kind of belongs together, in some way. And but as far as world building, we can use world building in our everyday lives, can't we?
Yeah, one could argue that that's the reason we do it in fiction, because we need to build a vision of the world in our head.
Well, yeah, Henry Darger, he never published the story of the Vivian Girls, like, officially. And so he had this entire world built in his head, and it was an audience of one partaking of it, which was a shame. But you hear that a lot with these silent artists who never intend for their work to be seen by millions, and they're appreciated posthumously.
Yeah, and Darger, he was apparently like very religious. Like I recall reading that at one point, a reference photo he used for the for one of the girls, he lost it, and he like spent a ton of time praying to God to return it, and got very angry at God when it didn't show up again.
Are you familiar with the comic book The Max?
The Max, yes.
How well?
I'm actually more familiar with the TV series, though.
Me too. Yeah, I bought the comics later, but I didn't feel they were as compact. I felt like the series like truncated things to a more necessary degree. I'm one of the few that liked the series better than the comic. But
I still haven't read the comic, so I can't say either way.
Julie Winters had her whole invented world, and it was so fleshed out that it actually intruded on her real world in that story.
Yeah, that's what the what did they call it? The Outback.
Yeah.
In it. That's what it was.
Loved it. Yeah, you had the Zeusodons, which were like they were these creatures with like their entire faces were eyeballs, and they had stripes like tigers, and then you had those little black bald things with no eyes. They were called the Izzes. They were the main carnivore, and then you had the Outback slugs, which they could jump, but they had never mastered the art of landing. And also there were air whales, which just kind of flew around. And Julie Winters became the leopard queen in there, and the Max was her protector. That was such a badass story, man. Seriously. Sam Keith knew what he was doing then, even though he didn't. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing, but you still know what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
He was following just pure storytelling intuition, and man, it worked. He's never told another story that has impacted me like the Max did. I kind of have this situation in my head right now where I have all these words and names for places and things that don't mesh up with anything, and I feel like they would make good fiction stories, you know? Like entire ecosystems in my head. And you'll hear at the beginning of this episode that, you know, in the interview I did with Michael Hodges, author of The Puller and Invasive, he kind of has invented his own ecosystems in his fiction for Severed Press. This is like a recurring theme in my life right now. And by the way, don't anybody get the idea of stealing any of this shit I'm about to spew out. It's mine, and I claim it, okay? But I do want to share it just because, you know, I want to confess these visions to somebody else who can appreciate them. Sometimes I get these manic flashes of inspiration, and I just start jotting down notes that don't have any relation to anything, right? And so I just started matching words together that have a real kick to them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, check these out and tell me which ones stick out to you. Stilt spiders, closet ticks, wire snails, muck rings, thorn apes, land eels, walking kites, hammerhead hounds. Now that's a visual there, right?
Yeah.
Clown sharks. I mean, there's clownfish, right? Why not clown sharks? Brain steaks.
I'm thinking of a shark with a clown face. That's
right.
Scary.
That would be awesome.
Fucking terrifying.
Yeah. Brain steaks, pillowfish, parchment men, like little men made of parchment. That would be more terrifying to me than clown sharks. But silverback fleas, you know, like gorillas, only they're like giant fleas in the face, you know, giant flea-faced gorillas, I guess, silverback fleas. Root vipers, I guess they would disguise themselves as trees or roots or something and attack. Omnivores, right? I don't know. Kelpapillars, underwater caterpillars, you know. Glimmermen, it's anglerfish humanoids, basically. You know those fish with the things down over their heads that light up, you know?
Yeah, imagining like a human with those similar features because they got those scary fucking faces. That would be terrifying. With
a humanoid body, but the same advantages, you know, facially and head-wise of an anglerfish, yeah. Okay? Flitterers, which are like dragonfly men, basically. Oh, speaking of which, I got attacked by a dragonfly earlier. It scared the shit out of me. I swear, it just flew through the window at me while I was at work. I seriously latched onto my clothes, and I saw its pincers. I didn't know dragonflies had pincers.
It wanted your blood.
Jesus. I tried to get it off like twice, and it's like everything I used just glided right over it. Scary shit, man. The only reason I was nervous is because of the pincers. I didn't know how strong they might be. Finally, I got it on and off my clothes and onto a napkin, put it out there, and then a car smushes it. And I felt bad about that for some reason. But now...
I didn't want to kill him.
I just wanted it off me. But now I've earned the nickname at work of the Dragon Slayer. Okay, I had a few more to name off here before we, sort of start wrapping things up. Ursa diapsids, which would be like a bear-turtle hybrid.
Huh. It sounds like almost something like out of like Japanese or Indian mythology.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going with. That folksy kind of, feel. Moss rabbits. They're basically what they sound like. Rabbits with like green fur that resembles moss. Groin weevils. No explanation there, right?
I
And
don't think I want one.
yeah, bog whites. Whites like from the Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings. The barrow whites that are like pale albino zombies.
Yeah.
Bog whites. And bog dogs. And I had a few more that at the end of this session of Mania that I just jotted down. The God Behaviorist. That'd be a good title for something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Chiropterosaur. I don't even know what that was that I was thinking about.
Definitely sounds like some kind of dinosaur.
It is a dinosaur. I think that Chiropterus is the scientific name for bat, so it would be a bat tyrannosaur or a pterodactyl hybrid or something. I don't know. Bedlamites. I don't even know what that would be, but it'd be a good name for a gang, right?
Yeah.
Duck
Almost sounds like the name of a metal band or something like that.
Bedlamites with opening guest pungent stench and cephalic carnage. Duck-billed lemurs. Have you ever heard of lampreys?
Yeah.
Those creepy, like, tube worm things with, like, the mouths, their heads are just mouths with teeth.
Yeah.
Hydra lampreys. How would you like to walk into one of those? Bump into one of those, huh?
That would be pretty fucked up.
And finally, lantern leeches, which are like, they have the luminescence of lightning bugs, only they're leeches.
These might be interesting for like a fictional zoological book.
That's what I'm thinking. And like I said, I claim all of these. No one, please, no one hijack this. Just because I took the initiative to talk about them on my show, please respect my boundaries creatively and leave these to me, okay?
Original characters, do not steal.
Yes. I mean, there is such a thing as creative license. I mean, come on. It's lame to steal. Let me have my own, brain children. But I don't remember if there were other things I wanted to get to, but I know that we've been at this for 2.5 hours. So if you would like an out, I'm willing to give that to you now. And whatever else we had to talk about, we can leave for next time. Whatever I wanted to talk about, you feel like wrapping up?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much exhausted everything we can for tonight.
Mm-hmm. Good talk, man. Thanks for joining me. My co-host for the immediate future, Ben Arzate. I'm pronouncing that right, yeah?
Pretty close to Arzate.
Arzate. There's an emphasis on the second A? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Ben, thank you for joining me, man, and hope everyone enjoyed the interview as well as our discussion, which lasted longer than the interview. Good talk, Ben, and keep in touch, brother.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
All right, and I will leave the listeners with a very interesting musical clip from a man from Holland who built a musical instrument with marbles. The name of the artist is Winter Gatan. Enjoy.
Hey guys, this is content.
You're all fucking autistic.